Good afternoon. This is Aratrika Rai from Department of English, Malda College. Today we have gathered here to celebrate Women's Day and through an international level webinar on gender and resilience, issues and perspectives. On behalf of the Department of English College, I welcome you all and thank you for joining us in this webinar. Today we will deal with one of the issues that is extremely relevant in the current world. On this occasion of Women's Day, I wish we can have freedom in true sense and we can liberate ourselves from stereotypical boundaries. We'll start the webinar with the inaugural song by Srimati Brototi Misro from our own department. Madam.
Thank you, Aratrika. Well, it's a very important day for us, International Day. My warm greetings to everyone present, especially to our distinguished speakers. The topic chosen for the webinar, gender and resilience, is also very relevant. And on this special occasion, I have been requested by our young colleague, Aratrika, to present the inaugural. I'm not at all a trained singer, though singing is my passion, so I like to accept the challenge offered, even after a recent attack of severe attack of viral fever, cold and cough. So, sorry from everybody. Sorry, the song I'm going to present is composed by no other than our greatest poet, Rabindranath Tagore, and it's a song, Tarangore, a song reminds us of the cosmic dance of the universe and makes us forget all questions or any bias.
হ্যাঁ ওটা আমি
And
ইয়েকে
makes
হ্যাঁ
us
জানালাম,
feel
আমি ওই
the
বিশ্বজিৎ
ecstasy
বাবুকে
of
জানালাম,
living on this planet.
উনি বললেন দেখছেন।
So my warm greetings, regards for everyone, and I'm trying to present.
এই যে ক্যান্ডিডেটটার যেটা আর কি আমাকে পাঠালো একজন টিচার, সেটা হচ্ছে সে ইংলিশ অনার্সের স্টুডেন্ট, বাট সে শুধু পলিটিক্যাল সায়েন্সের টিচার দেখতে পাচ্ছে, আর কাউকে কোনো ইংলিশের কোনো টিচারকে দেখতে পাচ্ছে না, সেটা আর কি একটা। আর আরেকটা যেটা আছে সেটা হচ্ছে ওই টিচার্সদের যেটা রিপোর্ট আছে সেখানে কোনো কোনো স্টুডেন্টের ফিডব্যাক দেখাচ্ছে, কোনো কোনো এবার এক হতে পারে যে তাদের হয়তো পড়েনি তাই শো করছে না। এবার সেক্ষেত্রে যেটা সমস্যা হচ্ছে, আমরা বুঝতে পারছি না যে কোন টিচারে পড়েছে কোন টিচারে পড়েনি, ফলে পুরোটা ওরকম দেখতে দেখতে গিয়ে একটা মানে বিশাল একটা প্রবলেম হয়ে যাচ্ছে। মানে ব্যাপারটা যেটা হচ্ছে, আমি আর রিপোর্টার টিচারের একটাও আমি দেখতে পেলাম না। তারপর গতকাল যার দেখেছিলাম রিপোর্টটা চেক করলাম, সেখানে দেখলাম যে হ্যাঁ সেই টিচারের থার্ড ইয়ারের একটা 8 না 6টা ইয়ে পড়েছে,
তাই
তো
দুইছে
সেইটা
দিন
দেখাচ্ছে ঠিকঠাক, কিন্তু
কারো
বাকি টিচার
চন্দ্র তারা
একটা
চমকি
পাঠিয়েছি
পিছে
সবারই ওরকম
চেতনা
বেশিরভাগই
ধারা
ফলে
দুলিছে দিন কারো চন্দ্র তারা চমকি
না মানে
কম্পিছে
টিচারের ইয়েটা
চেতনা
দেখে
ধারা আকুল
সেখানে কি প্রবলেম
চঞ্চল
কিছু নেই না।
নাচে সংসার
একা কেন, আমি
আকুল
এটা রিপোর্টের কথা বলছি।
চঞ্চল নাচে সংসার
হ্যাঁ
ঘরে হৃদয় বিহঙ্গ বিপুল তরঙ্গ বিপুল তরঙ্গ সব গগন বেলি মগন করি অতীত অনাগত আলোকে উজ্জ্বল জীবনে চলো কি আনন্দ
এবার ও বলছে যে শুধু ও নাকি শুধু অল সায়েন্সের টিচার দেখতে পাচ্ছে, কোনো ইংলিশের টিচার নাকি দেখতে পাচ্ছে না।
বিপুল তরঙ্গ
হ্যাঁ মানে লজিকটা যেটা আছে যে ও যে যে টিচারের ক্লাস
Thank you,
করেছে
madam.
সকলেরটাই দেখাবে বি
Now
ওটা
we
অনার্স
have
বি লাইক জেনারেল।
our welcome address by Dr. Anuradha Kunda.
হ্যাঁ শুধু তাদের, হ্যাঁ
Madam.
না
Thank
যাদের
you,
যাদের ক্লাসে
Aratrika.
অ্যাবসেন্ট ছিল তাদের না, অনলি যাদের ক্লাস ও অ্যাটেন্ড করেছে
Good
প্রেজেন্ট
morning and warm wishes to everybody on this International Working Women's Day. First of all, I should thank the
ও
principal
মানে
of the
ইংলিশের
college,
ইংলিশের ইয়েতে ওর কোনো
Dr. Manush Kumar
প্রেজেন্ট দেওয়া
Boito,
নেই, তাই তো?
uh, for having allowed this
ও না
the
না এটা
performance
লজিকটাই এটা হবে
and
যে
all the
যে
arrangements of
যে
this
স্টুডেন্ট যে
webinar.
টিচারের ক্লাস অ্যাটেন্ড করেছে
You,
মানে প্রেজেন্ট আছে
as a director,
সে তারটাই
Prabhash
দেখতে পাবে,
Chaudhary, and
বাকিদেরটা সে যেন
all
দিতে না পারে।
goes to
যে টিচারেরও
Aratrika
section
and
just for
and
presentation
Jyotirmoy, who have taken
অনার্স
care,
হ্যাঁ 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 যে টিচারের প্রেজেন্ট
made all the
সেই টিচারই
arrangements
ও যেন
this webinar. Welcome
না
all
না
the
সেকশনের
honorable
এখানে কোনো
speakers
দরকার
today,
ঠিক আছে
uh, and the participants as well. The students
হ্যাঁ
are
মানে
also
এটা
welcome
সেমিস্টার ওয়াইজ যে
because
সেমে যে টিচারের
each batch is not
ও ধরুন
exactly
হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে আমাদের এটাই তো
Women's
হচ্ছে
Day.
সেশন ওয়াইজ
Just
সেমিস্টার, সেই ক্ষেত্রে ও প্রতিটা মানে
want to
একটা সেমিস্টারও
say
একটা
a few words
এক্সাম দেবে,
that
এই সরি ফিডব্যাক দেবে, ঠিক আছে হুম হুম হুম
by Tabi,
ঠিক ঠিক আছে
who joined the farmer movement at the Alvar border, died in cold on 20 January. She was from Rajasthan. Just 3 days ago in the newspaper, all of us have got the news that Aya, a 23-year-old girl from Gujarat, and Rasika, another 25 years old from Kolkata. Just 3 days ago in the newspaper, they are once again the dowry victims. I've got the news that Aya, a 23 we hardly hear the name of Pratibha Sindhe, who took great initiative in Narmada Bachao, and now she's demanding the land rehabilitation of farmers in Gazipur and Singhu. Even our very own independence movement, which started in South Africa, Natali movement, it was led by Kasturba Gandhi, but she is hardly mentioned. According to the NCAER, women work as laborers. The percentage is 42%, but the percentage of landowners, women as landowners, is only 2%. In Gazipur and Singhu, toilets, no water, no electricity, so you can understand what region can be for women. This world's largest ongoing protest demonstration is to roll back the agricultural laws, taking leading role in this, and we are proud of that. In spite of that, the court's suggestion is that women are care workers providing cooking and services. But the women say this is not the men's test. We toil in the field. Who are we if not farmers? So on this particular day, we celebrate the release of Nodip Kaur. We didn't speak for her. It was actually Meena Harris who asked the release of Nodip Kaur, the Indian rights activist, tortured, sexually abused, and detained or bail for over 20 days. So there are different kinds of scenarios. On one side, Swati Mohan, she is leading perseverance to Mars. We can find CRPF girls are going to villages asking women to their land procedures. On the other hand, Nokar, as a Dalit, hardly heard. On 3rd March, 3 female journalists were killed in Afghanistan. Myanmar, Angela was shot dead. We all know what happened in Hathras. So whether it is capitalistic imperialism or a corporate democracy, spiritual corporate democracy. Women are till now harassed. We know what happened in human rights are violated. They say that the law will kill us. So what we want exactly is a dowry-free world, a violence-free, safe working place, free and male gaze-free perspective. On International, not Women's Day, Working Women's Day, because till now, homework is not paid. It is unpaid labor. What we want and what we get, that has to be considered. We want equal pay, equal rights, equal opportunity, and equal representation. And what we get, roses with thorns. The roses wither and the thorns remain. I welcome all the honorable speakers today who will enlighten us, and we are also eager to which might be very interesting. And I think everything, all lectures will help us to work in grassroots levels, the practical class to the practical work, to help people empowering non core. Not to help exactly, but in solidarity with them. Thank you. Once again, welcome everybody.
Thank you for setting the tone of the webinar. And we will hope that all the participants will help us in addressing all the issues that you have mentioned here. Now, I would request our principal, Dr. Mankumar Boidu, who has always encouraged us in raising all these issues through the webinars and seminars. I would request him to say a few words. Sir.
Thank you, Patrika. Firstly, I congratulate and convey sincere thanks to all the honorable speakers of today's international webinar. Dr. Ketaki Dotto, renowned poet and associate professor of English, Bidhannagar Government College, Kolkata. Debjani Dasgupta, a researcher, University of Sheffield, United Kingdom. Dr. Jinia Mitra, Associate Professor of English, University of North Bengal. Dr. Vipendra Banerjee, Assistant Professor, Department of English, University of Urbango. And Dr. Kovita Gopalkrishnan, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Basilius College, Kerala. I also congratulate and convey my sincere thanks to all the paper presenters as well as learned participants. Today, 8 March, International Women's Day, a day to celebrate the achievements of women, a day to raise the awareness about gender equality. On this auspicious day, the Department of English is going to organize an international seminar on a very relevant and important area, gender and research issues and perspectives. I also like to congratulate the conveners, Abhay Rai, and joint conveners, Aratrika Roy and Jyotirmoy Shil, for organizing this webinar. I hope today's webinar will cover all the aspects related to women, women harassment, as well as women achievement, domestic violence, women empowerment, everything. All the research person will cover these aspects. We, the participants, will be immensely benefited from their deliberations. I hope today's webinar will be a grand success. Now I like to conclude my speech with a saying: the COVID-19 crisis not only creates disaster, also creates the opportunity to come together as one mankind. It also gives the opportunity to learn together, to grow together. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir, for encouraging us once again. We have our keynote speaker, Sri Prakash Chaudhuri, who was coordinator for IQSE, and I would now like to ask sir to say a few.
Thank you, Aratrika. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, I can say till now that good morning to everyone. All important persons who are actively involved in teaching learning in our campus and beyond our campus. It is an international webinar on the occasion of Working Women's Day as a point of. In fact, she sets the orientation of this seminar very good way. Patrika a great responsibility to address the keynote of this seminar. It is dead weight, as not covered by any expertise, but I can share my thoughts, share my experience of reading some thoughts of recent days in the perspective of the gender resilience, perspective of gender roles as mentioned by Anuradha, citing very recent. In fact, I like to thank Department of English, despite their busy schedule for coming back visit the 1st and 2nd April in our campus. They are very special. They are organizing add-on course. They are organizing the beautiful seminar like this. And it is so easy nowadays for organizing these international seminar in easy way. In fact, we continuously radicalize ourselves for the betterment of life, facing every odd. It's of human. Gradually, sometimes full of intensity. And as mentioned, principle that disaster always intensifies our radicalizing. We have experienced it during and after the London Bridge, the rainfall of bombings, after the world where they experienced Londoners. We have experienced it in recent aftermath of massive earthquake in Mexico in 1986, and after that, a radical social change is happening there. And now we feel globally, across the globe, in response to corona pandemic. Yes, radicalizing means towards freedom. Patrika said, freedom beyond domination of hierarchy in our social relationship. But radicalizing also means experiencing continuous creation of closures. And for the last 500 years, the experience of subordination of all life activities to the requirements of only one activity, the active labor, and for that, creation of new identities. We, the human being, were redefined for the last 500 years with new definition, bearing new identities, and yet a society that is killing us. Created these brutal, bloody, misogynic, hierarchical relationships and making labor as a male activity, separated from all other life activities. Women were tortured, slaughtered, condemned as witches, restricted by laws, by religion, by social synthesis of male logic, male labor logic, and reduced to invisible non-person. And through suppression of all forms of pleasure of sex, perversion of sex, to genitalizing of sexuality, and lead to sexual dimorphism, only men's sex and women's sex. And all this happened only for the sake of creation and procreation of labor and of labor helper. Woman is labor helper. Creation the body as machine for labor, because labor, only labor, can only produce and reproduce capital. All these brutalities and hierarchies and identities are still today's matter, not that 500 years ago's witch hunting. In terms of brutality, the Middle Age never saw such bloodbath occurring every day. এত রক্ত মধ্যযুগ দেখেনি কখনো, as জীবনানন্দ. And in terms of relationship, despite all the glorious movement of all suppressed identities, and of course women in front, they are still within the logic of labor and serving the labor, surviving the capitalistic synthesis of this society. As long as we do it, we can't break the domination of hierarchical relations. We have to go beyond all hierarchical identities which make enclosures before us. And what we can do? We can stop making labor and thus capital. But how? Here arises question, and here come two utopia. According to one very interesting utopia, we are going to fully automatic labor-less society. And in the coming age, less and less labor is needed. So not full employment is our dream, but full unemployment is the future. Difference between labor and leisure is withering away, and thus capital. Framing it as abstract utopia, the concrete one tells us that it is always a struggle in, against, and beyond the domination of all hierarchical identities. And the movements of 21st century, the participation of women at massive scale, creating the logic of human, not woman, not man, not labor, not male labor. And we have seen in picketing movement of Argentina, and Anuradha cited the picketing movement in India. Square movement from Egypt to Europe to America, Occupy the Wall Street movement, grassroots democratic practices in the Valley of Italy against the so-called development and for the betterment of our environment, or grassroots practices, particularly with frontal activities of the women in Rojava, in Syria. And in this intensified pandemic time, we are on the streets across the globe, from Black Lives Matter and from Belarus to Hong Kong to Thailand to Myanmar. And we are creating the possibility of another world beyond hierarchical identity and creating horizontality of sharing. As Rabindranath said at the convocation of Calcutta University in 1937, that out of the unreason that bends our dignity down to the indiscriminate feet of the dictators, shattered this age-long shame of ours, and raise our head into the boundless sky, into the generous light, into the air of freedom. Thank you everyone for listening me.
Thank you, sir, for enriching us with your vision, and I wish we all could think like that. Now we will move to the technical sessions, and I would like Kaushik to take over and introduce our speaker, our first speaker, Dr. Ketaki Dotto. Kaushik.
Thank you so much, Aratrika Di. And now we will move to our first technical session of this 2 days international level webinar entitled Gender and Resilience Issues and Perspectives. Today we have with us as a resource person Dr. Ketaki Dotto. Let me introduce her. Dr. Ketaki Dotto is an associate professor of English, Bidhannagar College, Kolkata. She is a novelist, short story writer, critic, and a translator. Her debut novel, A Bird Alone, has won rave reviews in India and abroad. Her poems have been published in English, Fresh Perspectives, Book World 2011, Selected Short Stories of Rabindranath Tagore in Translation, Avenel 2013, The Black and Non-Black Shades of Tennessee Williams, Book World 2012, The Last Salute, Sahitya Academy 2013 are a few of her notable publications. The title of her presentation is Resilience After a Pandemic, the Women of India. Now over to you, madam.
A very good afternoon to you all. It is really very interesting to listen to the speakers, the keynote speaker, the welcome address, the person who delivered the welcome address, Anuradhati. They're also close to me. And Malda College is just my second home. Because since 2010, I think, I had gone to that college very often. So I am a member of the family of that college. And now it is a proud privilege to talk on gender and resilience issues and perspectives through a virtual platform, on a virtual platform, through a virtual platform, whatever you say. Now, today, I think that as we have talked about the present day gender problems, resilience, pandemic and post-pandemic resilience of gender. So now let me concentrate upon the foregrounding of everything, of feminism, of gender, to be precise. Then I will come to resilience. I will talk about gender resilience and its connection with the modern times, especially pandemic and post-pandemic. I cannot say it is post-pandemic because the rage is still there. It is still raging across the globe. So I cannot say that it has ended and this is post-pandemic era which has just begun. I cannot say like that. But anyway, where do I stand today? I am a woman. Today is the 8th of March, Working Women's Day, International Working Women's Day. Then what did my grandmother do? Was she not a working woman? What did her mother do? Was she not a working woman? What is working woman? In which sense are we working women? Because we go out, deliver lectures to the students in the precincts of a college or a university or a workplace. We work in a workplace, and that's why we are labeled as, stamped as working women. Are we? And weren't they? So what is the difference between the two? One is we are working, we are recognized. They were working, they were not recognized. So there is a divide, a schism, which is very much prevalent even today. Even today, at least 8 million, even more than 8 million women, they are working silently in the precincts of their households. So aren't they working women? Won't they come within this great banner of International Working Women's Day? What if I take the word working from here? Just International Women's Day as it had been before? Yes, herein I will talk about a few things to you. I know I will restrict myself to just 20 minutes, not more than that, because time is really very relentless. And the relentless march of time is always, I can hear at my back, time's winged chariot hurrying near. Anyway, it was 1792. Mary Wollstonecraft, with a checkered past, with a checkered present, she thought of writing a book, Vindication of the Rights of Women. Rights of women, rights and privileges, these are the two things which perhaps are very much opposed to each other. One who is fighting for the rights may not be privileged. One who is privileged need not think about rights. But in 1792, she was talking about women's rights. And naturally, she was talking about the right of vote for women. The suffragette movement was kicked off to a start by her book, Vindication of the Rights of Women. Perhaps we think that it was talking about equality and it was talking about the equal rights of man and woman. But even beyond that, if we stretch our gaze, we will find that Mary Wollstonecraft was also thinking about women's voting right. If we do not know how to vote, if we don't have the voting right, then what we are for? Because we will build the nation, we will have a say in the nation, we will have the decision-making power. Decision-making power, yes, this is another point which of course will come up in my discussion. What is decision-making power? Women so far, 1792 and even before that, they did not have the privilege of taking decisions in a household, let alone a broader area where they could speak even. They could not speak. They were mere listeners. They were mere obedient citizens of the nation. But after 1792, we find that there was a diverse society. The women, they were around. If they would spoken, then they could have been no more subalterns, but they remained as subalterns. If they could speak, they would not have been subalterns. Anyway, in immediately after that, in 1797, as I write poems, I became very much interested in Anna Laetitia Burwell's works. I was flipping through her poems, and my eyes got stuck to one poem, which started as the title of the poem was Rights of Women. It was written in 1797. It talked about the rights of women. Which rights? Rights in a broader perspective. Voting rights, rights to be equal with men, rights of equal pay for equal work, so on and so forth. And there beautifully, Anna Laetitia Burwell, in her beautiful words, is saying, yes, injured woman, rise, assert thy right. Woman, too long degraded, scorned, oppressed. You see, I'm just talking from memory. I don't have a cheat near at hand. So I'm depending on my memory. Yes, injured woman, rise, assert thy right. Woman, long degraded, scorned, oppressed, oh, boundary impartial laws despite, resume thy native empire over the breast. Go forth, arrayed in panoply, that angel pureness which admits no stain. Go, bid proud man to Go bid proud man his boasted rule resign, and kiss the golden scepter of thy reign. So you see, how could Anna Laetitia Barbol have such a voice to raise it to that particular decibel to say that go forth arrayed in panoply divine? That angel pureness which admits no stain, go bid the boasted male, the proud male, his boasted rule resign, and kiss thy golden scepter of thy reign. So this, of course, had created stir. Mary Wollstonecraft's work had, of course, created stir and held an appeal to a few hearts like Anna Laetitia Barbault's. Anna Laetitia Barbault was just one. And just after that, in 1869, in 1867, the Reform Bill came. In 1869, we find John Stuart Mill, who came with his book, The Subjection of Women. In The Subjection of Women, he talked about women's rights, equality, suffragette movement, and at the same time, the possible suffragette movement, and at the same time, he talked about marriage of two minds with equal faculties, and who would be able to accept the superiority of each other, who would not be dominating over one another, and would be leading and would be like to be led by each other, standing on an equal pedestal. I'm quoting from John Stuart Mill. Now, I'm entering into the present, not the present, the first wave, second wave feminism, as you all know. Beyond second wave feminism, I won't be going because you all know about that. You also know about first wave feminism. First wave feminism, when we get in 1949, our Simone de Beauvoir, she was coming up armed with famous work, The Second Sex. In The Second Sex, we find she was talking about equality, equal opportunity, and at the same time, our eyes get glued to only one sentence. One is not born, but becomes a woman. So what is the difference between born as a woman and becoming a woman? So therein lies the difference between the biological sex and the gender which is acquired. So now we are entering into gender. Biological sex, that is, we are born as women, that is given, that we come with, we are born with, but we acquire our feminine values, qualities, even go beyond that, bending those qualities, our own individuality as a woman. Then we become a gender. So there's a difference between the biological sex and the gender which we acquire. Now, Simone de Beauvoir also said, I think all of you know, there is a difference between male and female, because men are transcendent, they're transcendent. They live in transcendence. Their work, their invention give them a certain immortality which lead them onto the level of transcendence. And the women, they play a second fiddle to men, and they represent immanence. In immanence, Simone de Beauvoir is raising her voice in protest, and she is saying that as the women give birth to children in an animalistic fashion, they are relegated to the periphery and they are stamped as the creatures who have immanence, who have contributed to immanence only and nothing else. They are not transcendental as men are, because they cannot contribute anything to the future generation. Now, is it so? If we are our attention to America, what was Betty Friedan doing at that time? See, I'm entering into gender, and when I'm talking about feminism, I'm talking about gender, and of course, these two are intertwined. So I cannot turn a blind eye to feminism also. So you see, Betty Friedan in 1963, she came up with a mistake about the problem which has no name. And here she talks about the sufferings, the silent sufferings of the women who control the household affairs, who feed the children, who cook for the household members, and who look after all the members of the family. But their sufferings have no name because they cannot express themselves, they cannot give a voice to their sufferings. So, in the feminine mystic, Betty Friedan is saying, why can't they talk? They should come out of their homes to talk, to give vent to their pent-up feelings and voices which need some articulation. But Betty Friedan's feminine mystic was not accepted equally with equanimity. It was not accepted. So, being enraged, rather you can say, she went to form one group, NOW. This was a national organization of women, where she said that all the women should come and enroll who seek job in the army, in other areas as nurses, they can join, even in the other areas where the male populace dominate, they can come and they can join. So NOW was really a blow to the male bastion in those times, in 1963. Now, I will be talking about, I would love to talk about, after Betty Friedan, another person who was Shulamite Firestone. She had written a book in 1970, in 1966-68, which had been published in 1970, that was Dialectic of Sex. There, Shulamite Firestone talked many things. She talked about equal work, equal pay. She talked about the women who suffer silently. They should come and they should give a voice to their sufferings, and they should also contribute to the general pool of work where men also participate. Now you see 1914 to 1918, the First World War came. And in the First World War, we find, just after First World War, the women's suffragette movement got a fillip. And automatically, we also find that there was Spanish flu. And in that Spanish flu, the women folk remained least affected. How did it happen? Was it because of the beatitude of God or something else? Or just the power of resilience of women? No, not exactly. The women, they did not contract the flu much. Only the men did. Was it because the men had come outdoors and worked and participated in the war? Maybe that is a reason. But then we are accepting that women folk manage the household only. But that was not the thing. Anyway, after that, in a hurried manner, I'll be speaking about all these texts. In 1978, we find Mary Daly. She was writing a book. Again, she was an American theologian feminist. She was writing a book, and this is very important in the present context. Gyn Ecology, GYN/ecology. It had been published in 1978, and there she raised many questions, a slew of questions, which we all know that the answers are simply blowing in the wind, and the answers are yet to be found. There she says that we will question religion, we will question the language, which are simply imposed on us by the men folk. But you see, this bastion of man and the less pronounced bastion, if at all, of woman, if they are bifurcated, if they are forked apart, then automatically slew of problems will keep on persisting. So why not we say that no, religion, language, whatever, we will concentrate upon both man and woman. But no, it could not be done because the female folk, the women folk, they were being oppressed, they were being relegated to the background, while the men only raged supreme. They dominated the women folk and they suppressed the voice of women. So automatically, Mary Daly said in her book, Ecology, that religion, especially Christianity, it is bringing forth the male supremacy. How? Because here, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost. Where is God the Mother, God the Daughter, God the Holy Witch? So this question had been raised by Mary Daly in her famous book, Gynecology. And she was saying that while Christ was being crucified, he was representing the man folk, the men folk only, the man only, the male power only. And it should be simply nullified. If women folk have to gain eminence, then automatically this dominance of man in religion should be relegated to the background. But I think this is a very, very bold attitude. This is my opinion. Betty Friedan is saying in her 1963-66 book that the dialectic of sex will continue, but again, an answer can be found through gender. If the answer can be found through gender, then automatically sexuality and gender, they are walking hand in hand. They are simply trying to catch our attention by taking us to the two pedestals, one sex and another gender. Now, as we were talking about Mary Daly, let us finish her statements. She was saying that religion, as it preaches male-oriented society and the male domination, it should be simply annulled. She said that Christ should have another version who would not be just male-oriented, but also women folk should be focused. In gynecology, another problem is there, which she is upholding, that is language. She is saying that we have to wildize ourselves. Women have to wildize themselves. She's using the word wildize, wild eyes. And there she says that the language has to be remodeled. For example, therapist can be the/rapist. Stagnation can be stag/nation. In a similar way, our language can be fragmented and can also be utilized from the point of view of women. So this is my point of view, that if the rapist, the therapist becomes the rapist, then what is the role of a therapist? But she is questioning, and her question has some importance, some significance, no doubt. Now we are entering into the second wave feminism, where we come across many writers, and of course the French feminists like Julia Kristeva, Luce Irigaray, Hélène Cixous, but I am not elaborating on them This is not my perspective today. I'll be talking about gender. Then, of course, Elaine Showalter had been there, Kate Millett had been there, who who take the second wave feminism into the precincts of the third wave feminism, where women have their own language to speak. When women write, if they're stamped as a creature feminine, as our Elaine Showalter is saying, and as gynocriticism runs, then automatically we can concentrate upon two things. One is the voice of woman, the language of woman. If it is understood that the woman is writing, then what is she writing about? Her own problem, her pain, her sufferings, her being relegated to the background. Then why not accept it? I want to put forth two examples from two books. One is A Room of One's Own. Virginia Woolf, in A Room of One's Own, she says that a woman must have sufficient money to see herself through and a room where she can write. So in order to be a writer, a woman needs a room of her own and a woman needs sufficient money to see her through. What does she want to say? She wants to say that mere holding the pen and pushing it on the paper won't do. Women must have money to see her through as well. That means economic independence is being hinted at, is being pointed to rather. So as we are coming to economic independence, why don't we come to sexual politics? In sexual politics, Kate Millett is talking about the two bastions once again, the male and female automatically. And she's saying that the female writers are being relegated to the background. And even if the male writers are writing like Lawrence, D.H. Lawrence, they are trying to demean, trying to undermine the women's issues. For example, she's talking about Women in Love by D.H. Lawrence, and she's saying that how can Hermione's view be simply belittled? So naturally, we find that women folk now stands on the same pedestal of men. Do they? This is $1 million question. A few, just a few, handful, they have come to the front. They are working. They are rubbing shoulders with men in the working world. And that is why I think they are getting the appellation International Working Women's Day. Alack, what a pity. Those women who are cooking for us, our mothers, our grandmothers, they are not coming under the purview of International Working Women's Day. This is really very sad. Now I'm coming to the main issue of today, that is gender and resilience in the trouble-torn times, that is pandemic. I will talk about pandemic, but before that, let me talk about one organization. I had a privilege a few years back to talk to them, to work with them, to write with them. They are known as BRESCENT, building resilience and adaptation to climate extremes and disaster. That is BRESCENT, B-R-A-C-E-T. They are working to build resilience among the downtrodden, the women, the children, and those who are less privileged. Now, just a few months back, just a year back, I think, Dr. Andrew Norton with his team, Mary Vanessa Mason, and then Emily Wilkinson, they had worked with Dr. Andrew Norton to bring out a monograph which was titled Gender and Resilience. And there they talked about their experience of working in South Asia, in Africa, in Niger, and in South Africa, to be precise, where women, they're relegated to the background. Their work is not taken into consideration, and only a few enlightened women, they only talk about the women who suffer silently, because they are the subaltern, and the enlightened women, they are not subaltern anymore, to quote Gayatri Chakrabarti Spivak. Now, let me talk about resilience. What is resilience? It comes from the Latin word resilientia, that is bouncing back from a disaster, from stress or whatever. And this resilientia, if put in gender, men are more resilient or women are more resilient. Those who are men, they will be saying, of course, we are more resilient than women. And we will be saying, we, the women, will be saying that we are more resilient. The tug of war will go on. But what is the reality? The reality is the men, they go out to work. The men, they provide shelter to women even till death. Those who are not working outside and those who are working, they do not have a say in the household perhaps, but yet men stand supreme and they provide succor to the women. Now, when some disaster comes, for example, tsunami, when it hit the southern coast, what had happened? The fishermen lay scattered, dead and gone everywhere on the southern coast. And the women folk, they took charge of the family. They raised up the children. They talked about their own lack, their wants, and they were seeking redress for the loss which they had incurred because of the climate extreme, because of the disaster. Now, if women are not more resilient than men, then why could the women who survived the tsunami or any other disaster for that matter, they could come to the fore and speak for their want, their lack, and they sought succor from the government? You will say, people will say, men folk will say that the women folk have to come to the fore because they have to save the children. No, that is not the issue. One who cannot speak, cannot speak. She will remain behind doors, indoors. But when she can come to the fore, when she can raise her voice in protest, that what will we do now? How will we raise up our children? So naturally, the women folk have a voice which they can bring forth during the time of disaster, during the time of some stress or strain or some misfortune they face. So women are more resilient. No, I'm not going into a debate. Women are also resilient. Now, if we come to the present situation, the pandemic, March 2020, after that, no, before March, in March 2020, I had gone to Sabor, Bagur. Then I learned that some lockdown had been clamped. I was really flabbergasted. I did not know what to do. I was on the platform, the railway platform. A woman came up to me. She said that I'm a single woman. I have children. And I have children from different husbands. But I'm raising all of them alone. I am begging in the morning. In the afternoon, no, not in the late morning, I'm going to join some household work where I'm paid, and then I go home, I feed my children. Again in the evening, I go out for sewing jobs. I looked at the woman, I empathized with her, and I found how she could be so resilient because none of the husbands came to her rescue, provided her with and promised even to raise her children with her, supporting her, staying with her. So this is one example, a real life example which I encountered. Second, I know Suchitra, she's teaching Thakurpukur Andrews Public School, this convent. And there, Suchitra De has not been accepted as Suchitra De. In 2011, she joined She was Hiranmoy at the time. 2011 to 2016, she worked as Hiranmoy. And to that, as she felt that a woman was there in her, she went for the surgeries, the possible surgeries for transformation. She transformed in 2007 in Kolkata itself, and now she's working there as Shuchitra De, but she is called Hiranmoy D by all others in her neighborhood, and she answer such questions, such ignominious questions like, where is your private parts? Is it a trans woman's? Is it a woman's? Is it a man's? But she still faces the questions, and in an undaunted fashion, she answers, I have no sex, I have a gender, I am woman, and that is a gender. Now I am coming to 1990 book, Judith Butler's book, Gender Problem. She talks about, first time perhaps, she talks about this transgender sexuality. She talks about butch and fame. She says that woman acquires gender. She is not a woman, she is not born a woman, this one. Just like Simone de Beauvoir, she also speaks in that way. And there she says that there is another orientation of sexuality. That is, they can be the same-sex love, just like Ruth Vanita, she also speaks that way. Now, let me conclude today because so many paper presenters are there. In the gender resilience we find resilience a factor which should be accepted by the sufferer. And who makes them suffer, he should feel or she should feel that one cannot be made to suffer, because suffering is a common term, is a ubiquitous term where we all come under that umbrella term. So naturally, gender resilience, today's topic, is an issue which we all resonate, we all can relate, and we all can, of course, at one. To conclude, I will refer to one particular fact in Kerala. In Palakkad district, we found a 84-year-old sculptor erected a statue of a nude woman, a naked woman, Yakshi. Yakshi means demoness. It is an 18 feet tall female statue straddling in a triangular position, and no male gaze can depict it because men cannot look at it. Nowadays, men can look at it. Men can appreciate its beauty. And Kanhaya, who had erected the statue, he said that nature is good, so automatically this demon stay nude. Nature nude, woman can stay nude. There is no harm in that. So naturally, these days, present women, men, they're going there, selfies, clicking photos, and they are saying that we are at one with women, we stand on the same pedestal. Gender resilience is something where the factor resilience is important. We should emphasize that, and we are looking forward to the papers which are being presented today. Thank you all. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Aratrika, the principal of the college, and all who lent a patient ear to what I said. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ketaki madam, for this brilliant and thought-provoking research paper and providing us such useful information. I'll request all the participants, if you have any question, query, and comments, please put the question in the chat box. At the end of the first technical session, we will take up the questions one by one. So now move to next part of this first technical session. We have with us three speakers. First speaker is Sayantoni Sengupta, independent research scholar. And due to some medical emergency, our second speaker, Aftab Alam, is able to present his paper. So we have given the opportunity to Labuni Sarkar, who is a PhD research scholar of Raiganj University, to present her paper. And our third speaker is Dr. Shubhapriya Chatterjee, Assistant Professor of Economics, Gaurav Gwin Memorial College, Paschim Mednipur. This session would be chaired by Dr. Ketaki. Now over to you, madam.
Thank you very much. So we move into the papers. I think very thought-provoking papers by the three participants. May I ask the first one, and may I know the title of the paper? I think it is there.
Yes. First speaker is Sayantoni Sengupta, and the title of her paper is Until the Last Echoes of Feminine Resilience in Mahabharata.
This is quite interesting. Female resilience in the Mahabharata. This may raise many issues which are already mind-boggling, and we may raise many eyebrows as well. So let us listen to the paper first, then comment on that, and we will ask questions. So Shantanu Gupta, I request you to present your paper.
Hello. My
Yes,
name is Shantanu Gupta, and the title of my paper is Until the Lion: Echoes of Feminine Resilience in Mahabharata. The epic of Mahabharata, propelled by the actions of its female characters, both overtly and covertly, is generally considered to be the epitome of feminine resilience. In the epic, the women are both the oppressed and wronged victims of the war, as well as the ultimate survivors of the war. A war that has left larger throngs of widows than it did of victors. The paper seeks to launch an exploration into the heart of the raging hatred that is the predominant force behind the ceaseless resilience of Mahabharata's women in Kartika Naya's Until the Lion, Echoes of the Mahabharata, and to analyze the purpose behind the existence of the blinding hatred. The paper will also try to unveil the duality inherent in the hate, a hate that both destroys and preserves, and to explore how and why feminine resilience survives even the all-consuming fire of hate. The burden of a story is usually borne by the central characters. However, when it comes to an epic like the Mahabharata, the center and the periphery become almost indistinguishable, especially since the peripheral characters are just as central to the narrative of the epic as the central characters. However, most of the narrators, failing to capture the nuanced blending of the two, have painted the story in bold and simple strokes, robbing it of the intricacies that are brought in by the peripheral characters. Kartika Naya tries to right the wrong in her poetic retelling of Mahabharata. Taking the title from an Igbo proverb, Naya's Until the Lions tries to do precisely what the proverb suggests: capture the echoes of the marginalized voices, such as those of Satyavati, Gandhari, Kunti, Amba, or Shikhandi, etc. Interestingly enough, marginalized voices in this narrative, contrary to expectations, belong to the survivor, who are neither the victor nor the vanquished. Nayar is completely aware how in the epic of Mahabharata, women have often been relegated to the narrative blind spots and only occasionally allowed to the forefront with incomplete identities that were closely dependent on their warrior sons, husbands, and fathers. While exploring the portrayal of women in epics, Margaret Bessinger notes that women in epics are often depicted as the other, whose sole purpose is to give birth to heroic warriors and bemoan their loss and death. But breaking free isn't as easy as it sounds. Nair, her work, seeks to do precisely that. In fact, her intention is boldly revealed by Amba or Shikhandi when she finally understands that to be free she needs to kill Bhishma. For our lives to commence, you'd need be killed. In Naya's text, it is the men who are at war with each other and not the women. Their allegiance is immaterial because, irrespective of their allegiance to either the Kauravas or the Pandavas, they will always belong to the category of the survivors. By grouping the women into a single category, away from the she severs the ties between women and the warrior men their identities were dependent upon. Thus, she rescues the women from their quasi-human existence and segregates them into a different category where they have their own identities as survivors. Born to hate and nurtured by hate, her women therefore inhabit a realm that knows neither victory nor loss, a realm that solely belongs to the ones who survive in the wake of devastation, a realm of childless mothers and widows, a realm of ultimate resilience. Mahabharata is generally considered to be a story of an epic war between forces of good and evil. However, the boundaries of good and evil cannot be clearly demarcated because the epic of Mahabharata occurs in dualism, which often causes the binaries to merge into an inseparable whole. It is the same dualism that distinguishes the nature of hate in Nayar's poetic masterpieces as well. The hate in Nayar's Until the Lions, more than an organic component of the story, is a buried primeval force preceding the existence of all the characters. This hate flows to the vascular system of the epic. The tale is bound to this primordial hate, bound by it, engendered by it, engendering it, till everything is engulfed by it. Hate is both the preserver and destroyer in the case. Every evil in Naya's tale, every action, and every evil incident is propelled by hatred. This hate is the thread that ties things together, and every reaction is pulled by it till it destroys one and all, leaving behind nothing but scars and ashes. While the source of this hate may be unknown, one thing is certain. Naya's women are all either born in hate or born of hate, and having internalized this hate since childhood, they are all immune to its ravages. Satyavati, Naya's primary narrator, knows the nature of the hate only too well. Its foundation was laid by her father early on when he discarded her nonchalantly because of her obnoxious fishing image. However, she did not let her father's callous dismissal of her force her into a lifetime of anonymity. Instead, she gathered all the hate that she could muster and wielded it into a powerful weapon, using her thwarted desires and unrequited dreams. Her dream of becoming the future queen, propelled by hatred that was as much her own as it was not, caused her to claim the throne of Hastinapur for her sons from Bhishma. It led Bhishma to take an oath of secrecy, an oath with repercussions graver than her mortal soul could have imagined, something which could have caused the Kurukshetra war almost single-handedly. One cannot help but admire the pure force of feminine fortitude that Satyavati exudes, a force so potent that it compelled the almighty Bhishma to submit. Right or wrong, Satyavati, by the virtue of her innate feminine resilience, power of her hate, manages to gain all that her heart desires. Hate is a double-edged sword in lions. Satyavati's hate infused Amba's life. While Ross swallowed her and smothered by hate, she was born as one vengeance, Shikhandi. This hate was passed along to Drupad's clan, with Shikhandi as the torchbearer. Instead of resigning herself to the destiny set by the men in her life, Amba or Shikhandi uses her hate to recreate her destiny. Her feminine resilience emerges triumphant when she chooses to end her life in order to gain a fresh start. Even Drishta and Draupadi, the son and daughter of Yajna and fire, were really the offspring of Drupad's personal hate. Hatred was also a gift passed on from a clan to another, weaving the tale and fortifying the pathway to the inevitable doom. Bhishma and Kuru clan's mindless annexation of Gandhar and the destruction of people planted the gift of hate into the heart of Shami, a gift which would come to haunt the Kuru clan into extinction. What is noteworthy about the hatred innate in both Drupad and Shakuni, the kind of destructive nature race to. Theirs is a hate so resilient that survival becomes secondary. After the birth of both the Pandavas and the Kauravas, when Satyavati returns in order to protect her flesh and blood from tearing each other apart, she mistakes the war to be a result of the clash between the good and the evil and decides to save her descendants. However, Vyasa explains it's not evil itself that will plague her descendants initially, but hate. Vyasa discloses that the potency of this almost kinetic hate is so intense that it is almost impossible for it to be obliterated or even diluted by divine beings. The hate experienced by men begets war, while the hate experienced by the women strengthens their resilience. Thus, hate in Nayar's tale is a source of sustenance for women and a source of destruction in men. Even though all women characters are nourished by and nurture hate, they never seek to destroy each other. Although there are no qualms in acting as the agent of destruction of men, as in case of Amba or Shikhandi. While the men, blinded by the inherent hatred, destroy each other till precious little survives, Naya's women, despite falling prey to the patriarchal forces, use their hate to lead a free life, no matter what cost. That is why, even after the war, indiscriminate decimates everything, the feminine resilience persists. Thank you so much.
Madam, you are mute.
Thank you, Shantani, for the brilliant discussion on Karthika Nayar's famous work. This is Until the Lion. It goes from the Mahabharata. I read it. I found you were talking hatred much. And why don't you talk? Is it absent in the Mahabharata or among the women? But your paper was so brilliant that because you, from the point of view of the multiple voices which Karthika Nayar put there in this writing. So, do you think that this is the question? Hatred was the prime issue which was moving through the characters and which was polluting them from within. I should say polluting them from within. If so, then in which we find that these multiple voices help to all the readers, not alike, of course, but even then to all the readers. I really loved this paper. I really loved the book itself, Karthika Nayar's book, and the multiple voices through which she presented different characters. Thank you very much, Anthony. We are moving on to the paper. We will be taking the questions later. And please pick the next one.
Yes. As we are already running late, I shall request to paper presenters to maintain the time limit. You have maximum 10 minutes. So our paper presenter is Lavani, and the title of paper is Ontological Status of Anthropology on Discrimination, Gendered Body, and its Performativity through women's constant resilience against atrocious past social hierarchy.
Yes,
So, Lavani Sarkar?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
A very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my paper. The title of my paper is Ontological Status of Thanatopraxy on Discrimination, Gendered Body and its Performativity through Dalit Women's Constant Resilience against Atrocious Caste and Social Hierarchy. So today is International Women's Day, and we celebrated around the world today. It is a day for women. From liberal humanism, we can say women are equal to men. Today we say about women empowerment. The suffering of the women have not finished, but in society, it plays a pivotal role and under the process of gender socialization. They only treat as a weaker section and deprived of education. From medieval to historical era, women are marginalized and subaltern through the different discourses, bands of patriarchy. Patriarchy makes women undergo physical and psychological trauma from their birth to the end of their life. Despite their adversity, they are very energetic and continuously act performatively in the field. They are resistant and resilient in negotiate trust social system. Like American philosopher and gender theorist Judith Butler, Dalit women had not believed in gendered body, they only believed in gendered performativity. Like Alice Walker, they celebrate feminism as Dalit feminism. The autobiography of the Dalit women is not only a saga of individual, but also depicts sorrow, suffering, subjugation, and social economic conditions in our society. The biography also indicates how Dalit women suffer from the deep pressure because of their gender, economic condition, and their low caste. The practice of caste is like a social disease, and it is easily acts on the orthodox people. Here I use a Greek word, thanatopraxy. From prefix thanatos means the suffix praxi means practice. The whole process of cross sanitization is called thanatopraxia, and I use the word thanatopraxia as a process of sanitization of all kinds of discrimination which exists in the society. Shavarna or mainstream feminism in India overruled Dalit feminism or Dalit humanism. It explores the appropriation of Foucault's dictum of pain is power by Dalit in establishing a literature of their own, nourished by hard labors of the Dalit males. Mama Faustina, a Dalit woman writer who has vast her experiences in all her writings. Her autobiographical novel Karuku and another novel Sangati discuss different issues like caste, gender, etc. She, as a writer, rejects all kinds of stereotyping of society, traditional values of her community. Her writings give voice of the voiceless people in her community. She is a standout Hindu religion which denies women right to be independent. In Shangati, has discussed how stereotypes of gender demand that all household works like cleaning, cooking, laundry, babysitting, field, etc. are done by the girls, where the boys enjoy playing games or hanging out with other friends in the village. In Bama, I say that marriage is one of the mechanisms through which the patriarchy subjects and control women. The French feminists were commenting on this method of socialization. Her 1990 book, The Second, said, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." To Bama, Dalit feminism means Dalit are equal to any woman. Men belong to any caste, whether Dalits or non-Dalits. It also refers to Dalit women are supreme. They are not second. There is a conversation between Meena Krishnan and Bama Faustina at Kerala Literature Festival in 2018. Here she has given a clear answer. She said, "Whoever practice this in nefarious caste system, they are not human beings because they are not only degrades the Dalits, but also degrades themselves also. They are not human beings. They have no dignity. Only Dalits have dignity because they respect each and every people in this world. For this reason, Dalits are superior for human spirit." Urmila Power, another woman writer, and her autobiography is Adon, and it is translated by Maya Pandit, and the book title is "Wave of My Life: A Dalit Man's Memoir." delineates a journey from a small village to the huge metro city. Her incessant struggle in a variety of forms. Dalit, woman, caste. Kalyani Thakur Charal is one of the recognized Dalit voices from West Bengal. She belongs to Mutua community. Mutua means Name Premi Matwara. Impassionate devotees, community leader Horichand and Guru Thakur, whom they consider avatars of Vishnu. She herself discussed discrimination when she arrived in Kolkata for studies. According to her, the structure of caste discrimination is inside in every person. The one is discriminating and also the one who is being discriminated. She also victimized by caste discrimination, but also subverts the caste hierarchy in Bengal by using Charal as her surname. She said, Charal or Chandal is an abusive word. It a tag meant to humiliate the Dalits. Her autobiography is Ami Keno Charal Likhi. Why I Write Charal 2016. Here she criticizes the Bengali Babu culture and how Bengali Bhadraloks are dangerous for a young girl. In her autobiography, she has mentioned it, how her elder sister was raped by Bhadralok's private tutor. She writes in her poem Nom 33 from her 2011 collection Chandalini Kobita. I will have to remember there is no Dalits in Bengal. Dalits are everywhere in the world, not here. She and many others have published a magazine, Neer, a platform to raise the voice against the kinds of discrimination and class hierarchy in Bengal. With Dr. Amartya Singh quote, voice is a central component of the part of social justice. I have taken this quote from his book, The Argumentative Indian Writings on Indian Culture, History and Identity. Dalit women empowered themselves to raise the voice. They are still speaking in their species rather to reside in a nation that does not regard them as the other. They are not subaltern. Gayatri Chakraborty in her essay, Can the Subaltern Speak?, has given a vivid answer that subaltern cannot speak. If the subaltern can speak, then he or she does not belong to subaltern. Their constant resilience and gender performativity upgrades their social status. They make a room of their own by taking writing as a career. On this day, I only say, women be the man of every woman. And here, in my paper, I use MLS citation H formula for everyone.
Thank you, Lavini, for your brilliant paper. You talked about the deplorable plight of the Dalits elsewhere, but not West Bengal. Talked about Kalyani Thakur's teachings. I met Kalyani Thakur long time, and it is really a very bad situation of the Dalit women specifically. If you go to the Uttar Pradesh, you will find how they are not allowed to touch the water belonging to the higher castes. So I should say that's a very nice paper, and you have read it well. Thank you very much. We are now passing on to the next paper presenter. Endurance to Resistance, Representation of Violence on India's Daughters in Hindi Cinema, by Dr. Shubhapriya Chatterjee. She's an assistant professor of English, Gaurav Gui Memorial College, Cochin. May I request Dr. Shubhapriya Chatterjee to read out your paper?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Shubhpriya Chatterjee. I work as an assistant professor in English in Gaurav Guin Memorial College. Today, the topic of my paper is Endurance to Resistance, Representation of Violence on India's Daughters in Hindi Cinema. And I would like to present my paper along with a PowerPoint presentation. Please allow me to share my screen with you. So here I start. Being a girl in Indian society is not easy because girls are never considered equal to boys. This is not a country where girls are expected. The patriarchal mindset is well proven by the adverse sex ratio. Sons are preferred over daughters, and daughters are seldom raised to fulfill their potential. Violence against girls devastates their lives, limits their choices, and has lifelong impact on their health and well-being. As Christopher Hitchens writes, quote unquote, to terrify children with the image of hell, to consider women as an inferior creation, is that good for the world? It is high time that we must protest against all these forms of violence. Can we ever create a safe environment for female children and support their resistance to violence? In search of this answer to this question, I would study the representation of violence on India's daughters in Bollywood films. In Indian society, violence against a girl child takes different forms, including child marriage, female feticide, sexual abuse, sex trafficking, female genital mutilation, domestic violence, rapes, and acid attacks. Financial exclusion, limited educational opportunities, illiteracy are other issues that female children have been facing for centuries in our society. Hindi films have taken into account this disparity in our society between a male and a female child by questioning the divide. Films like Water, Highway, Parched, Secret Superstar, Mardani, Article 15 have effectively presented the violence and abuses that a girl child has endured for ages. Some of these films have given us girls who stand for their rights, raise their voices against injustice, and rebels when she has to. Such films voice their dissent and celebrate their liberation from claustrophobic existence as they choose resistance over endurance. The first film that I will be taking is Perched, which was released in 2015. It is directed by Leena Yadav and is a powerful women-centric drama which highlights various problems faced by rural women. It brings the issue of child marriage by portraying Janki, played by Leher Khan. Janki is a village girl of Rajasthan in her early teens who is forced to marry, leaving her studies aside. Child marriage, which is still a common phenomenon in our society, leads to psychological, social, mental, and physical issues for any girl child. In spite of government's efforts to ban child marriage through legislation and enforcement, the prohibition of this practice seems impossible. Sudhir Kakar opines, quote unquote, to marry off one's daughters propitiously is considered one of the primary religious duties of Hindu parents. Janki resists her marriage by chopping off her hair, but that does not change her fate. She is dragged into that marriage with Gulab, who is disrespectful and rebellious. She is raped repeatedly by her cruel drunkard husband against her wishes. Jane Freedom studies Susan Brown Miller's book Against Our Will, Men, Women and Rape, which was published in 1975, where the author argues, quote unquote, all women suffer from this rape, even if they are not actual victims of rape, because the system of rape keeps all women fearful and subordinated to men. This is a film which projects a girl who has graduated from being silent receptor to being an individual of substance. She continues her studies with the help of her childhood male friend who supplies books to her secretly. And finally, she succeeds to quit from that marriage and study further with the help of her mother-in-law. The second film that I will be discussing is Highway, which deals with the issue of child abuse explicitly. Female children in India are subjected to child sexual abuse. They silently succumb to this exploitation due to familial pressures or sometimes due to lack of knowledge. As a girl child of 9 years, Veera, the protagonist, played by Alia Bhatt, gets exploited by one of her close relatives. She was lured by offering imported chocolates and was taken to the bathroom where she was abused brutally. When she reveals the incident to her mother, she forbids her to disclose the truth to others. She remains silent for years in deep mental agony. However, she learns to question about the injustices she faced within the four walls of her home after she gets kidnapped as an adult. The film traces a journey of self-discovery. She voices her childhood trauma for the first time after she returns home from being kidnapped. A scene in the last portion of the film is very significant, where Veera reveals that such abuses happen all the time in Indian families. They are common to every girl child in India, but the perpetrators are seldom punished. And the most shocking fact is that in most cases, the perpetrators are persons known to us, or sometimes they can be even from our own family. Janki and Veera assert their autonomy, subjecthood, and freedom moving apart from the normative male-centered structure. Can we imagine them as actors and subjects with the intention, determination, resolution, and discretion to remake their world? The arrangements within which they survive regulate them continually, yet they exercise their agency, confronting the coercive, standardizing structures. Their form of integration and independence is expressed through their journey from endurance to resistance, as reflected in these two films. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Chatterjee, for your brilliant paper. I was wondering, why did you leave out NH10? At least in NH10, the girl could have protested against the domination of patriarchy. And you have put forth your paper brilliantly, the points brilliantly. Thank you so much. And now I open all these 3 papers for questions. If you have any questions, please ask, because we are running behind schedule and another session has to begin very soon. So please ask the questions, or you can send into the chat box, or you can ask also. The presenters are here, so you can ask them questions. Shantani Sengupta, Dr. Subhapriya Chatterjee, and Laboni Sarkar. These 3 were the presenters with different topics to talk about, to share their views with, and their deliberations were quite interesting. But I would love to get a few questions for them. Please come up with a few questions. I ask you all. Whoever asks will be credited, really. Please, you will be given the credit, please, if you have any question. May I thank anyone who has a question to ask? We are running behind schedule.
Yes.
The questions are welcome. Please
if
ask.
you have any question, we can take 1 or 2 questions in this interactive session.
Yes. we can accept 1 or 2 questions, 1, 2, 3 questions for 3 participants or paper presenters. Please ask them questions. They're here to answer. At least 1 or 2 questions must be there.
Well, I don't think there are any queries on the part of the listener, at least from the paper presenter. But ma'am, I would like to share one particular question posed by Pooja Sharma. She has a query, and that is to you. She is saying, "Thank you for this lovely presentation, ma'am. I am compelled to wonder about evolution of women's movement in India. Since feminism is no longer a universal monolith, what about Indian experience?"
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. In a nutshell, I'll be talking about feminism. You see, feminism in India is still a chimera. Feminists are there, self-proclaimed feminists are there, and some are genuine feminists who work for women. If you come to the different NGOs, you will find that so many women, Moitri Chatterjee, I know one of them, who raise questions asking for the women to be given the proper rights. They should be given equality for equal job, equal pay for equal work, equal rights for everything at par with men. But are they at all listened to? Or we turn blind ears to all of them? If we come to the activists, you see, Deepa Mehta to me is an activist. Meera Nair to me is an activist. Nandita, the actress, she's an activist to me. They all are activists through their works. They raise questions. Those are answered on some levels and some go unanswered. If you talk about feminists, I should say Draupadi is feminist to the core. When she was asking for more clothes to be given to her while she was being humiliated in the court, and it was being supplied by a male, and she was asking as a female, even then we should call Draupadi the feminist #1, the feminist from India. Why? Because always, #1, always, she had the courage to speak her mind. She was asking for help. She knew not from which quarter it will come, but it came from Lord Krishna. That's different. But she asked. She could speak. When she was going on a last journey along with other family members, she blatantly could have said that Bhim loved me. Bhim loves me. So this particular articulation of one's mind can come from a woman who is courageous and who can talk about equality. Equality in every aspect. Draupadi was one such woman. If you come to a Dalit woman who writes, that is Kalyani Thakur. If you go through Kalyani Thakur's poems, you will find she is also a feminist, because she says that I am a Chandal. I belong to that category. But am I? If I ask you who is not a Chandal, then what will you say? So naturally, you see, then caste, creed, all these questions are being thrown to the winds, and the feminist speaks out through Kalyani Thakur. If you come to the other women of different NGOs who are working, I know one called Medha Mukherjee, who works for different women. I know one Amrita Sen, who works for the women who are downtrodden, who are raped, and who are kept in the rehabilitation centers. They are the feminists. So I know real life feminists. Maybe you are a feminist as well. So who is a feminist? In India, the women who give voice to the oppressed, who give voice to the downtrodden, who give voice to those women who stay indoors and work silently, they are the real feminists. I think I could answer you, but you may not be satisfied because I did not talk about the established feminists of India. If I talk about them, Sushi Tharu, if I talk about them like Sushi Tharu or like Ruth Vanita, then you will think that yes, they are the established feminists. But why don't we talk about those feminists who work silently but work for the rights of women? Thank you so much. I think I could answer you. Any other question for the
Thank
three
you.
paper participants? For the
We
three
have
paper
we have one question to Dr. Subhapriya Chatterjee, and
participants?
this question is raised by Shrestha Chatterjee, and
Yes.
she asked, "Ma'am, how the increasing focus on violence perpetuated by men in films and TV shows add to the narrative of toxic masculinity and hinder the emotional development of young men in today's society?"
Yes, Dr. Chatterjee, please answer.
You can see the question in the chat box.
Dr. Chatterjee, over to
Yes.
you.
Yes, for example, when we find the lyrics of our uh, common movie songs, then we find that the words, the sentences that has been used, those are just derogatory remarks on a female's body, their body parts, and nothing else. So these are nothing but the representation of toxic masculinity. And for example, the names of some movies, if you see the names the names of some recent movies, the names just give us idea about how masculinity has been represented in films and has been cherished by as a theme which women find in their daily lives. But these sort of representation, they generally hinder the development, the mental, psychological, and emotional development of a young girl child, and they don't understand in what ways they could develop themselves, and so they are really hindering their development, their emotional, mental, and psychological developments. Yes, it is.
Thank
Thank
you, Dr. Chatterjee. Any other question from anyone?
No, we don't have any question now. So now, thank you. I would like to thank Ketaki Datta for chairing this session, and I also would like to thank the three paper presenters. Now
Thank you.
we will move to our second technical session. I shall request to Aritrika Di to introduce our resource person of the second technical session. Over to you, Aritrika Di. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Ketaki madam, once again for the wonderful session that we had. And we are about to begin our next session. We are running late, so I will hurry without any words. I would like to introduce the speaker. We are extremely privileged to have her amongst us today. Our next speaker is Devjani Dasgupta. She is a researcher from the University of Sheffield, United Kingdom. Uh, she has completed her PhD in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning from University of Sheffield and currently working in University of Manchester. Earlier, she pursued a postgraduate program on poverty and development at the Institute for Development Policy and Management as a Cheving Scholar of the United Kingdom government. She also holds another master's degree in comparative literature from Jaipur University, India. And in between her studies in India and the UK, she worked as a development practitioner in India for 13 years in the field of gender, education, planning, poverty management, and rural development. As the state coordinator for gender intervention and girls' education in a DFID UK sponsored project under the aegis of School Education Department of Government of West Bengal. She has instrumental in policy formulation and educational planning for the girl child.
Hello, Aratrika. Hello, Aratrika, are you there? I think she's having some kind of network issues. Just a second. Let me just check. Okay, so let me take over right now. As Aratrika was doing, let me introduce our resource person for the second technical session. Yeah, so Devjani Dasgupta has completed her PhD in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning, University of Sheffield, and currently works in the University of Manchester. Earlier, she pursued a postgraduate program on poverty and development at the Institute for Development Policy and Management, University of Manchester. As a Chevening Scholar of the UK government, she also holds another master degree in comparative literature from Jadavpur University, India. In between her studies in India and the UK, she worked as a development practitioner in India for 13 years in the fields of gender, education, planning, poverty management, and rural development. As the state coordinator for gender intervention and girls' education in a DFID UK sponsored project under the aegis of School Education Department of Government of West Bengal, she was instrumental in policy formulation and educational planning for the girl child and gender interventions in the state. Subsequently, she moved to the Panchayat and Rural Development Department under the Government of West Bengal, where she was a part of two projects funded by the DFID UK and the World Bank aimed at installing a more effective pro-poor local governance system in the rural sector of West Bengal. And overall system development through capacity building of the local self-government units of the state. Her research interests include governance issues, the role of pupils' participation in poverty reduction, and the relationship between gender and poverty. She will talk on poverty reduction strategies and women's empowerment. So welcome to this webinar, ma'am, and over to you.
Thank you so much, and good morning from UK, good afternoon to all those in India. I'm so privileged to be a part of this seminar, webinar in today's terms. And I thank the authorities of Malda College and the English department for giving me this opportunity on this Women's Day. It's a topic very close to my heart, though I moved over to, other working on other issues. My first point of interest has always remained women's empowerment in different sectors. So I would like to give a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm trying to.
No, let me just share that for you.
Okay, if you can, that would be great.
Right.
I'm taking this opportunity to actually apologize my
connection got disconnected and I lost the touch. Sorry for that. And thank you, ma'am, again for joining with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you present there.
Just give me a second.
Is it easier for me?
Oh, is it okay? Okay.
So we are speaking on gender equality, but my presentation will specifically feature will focus on women. So I'm not covering the LGBT community in this specific presentation, but definitely everything is it's all encompassing. And I've been a development practitioner most of my life. I've been involved in policy making mostly. So my main interest is how development strategies are formulated, how they are visualized, and how they're implemented finally. And I'm focusing on how it affects poor women. So this specific topic that of the that why poor women are important, why the relationship between gender and poverty is very important. That was highlighted in the Beijing Platform for Action in 1995 in an assertion that a disproportionately large percentage of the world's poor, that is almost 70% of the world's poor. Can we move over to the next slide, please? Yeah. So are women. And so after this discussion in Beijing, there was a call for the development agencies like World Bank, the United Nations, or the Asian Development Bank to work towards achieving gender equity. But most of these development agencies actually thought of gender equity as an instrument for poverty reduction. I'll explain that term in a while, why I call it instrument for poverty reduction. However, gender equality is still a central agenda. It maintains its centrality in global development goals like Millennium Development Goals, or currently the Sustainable Development Goals, which are development objectives of the United Nations. So how are these development objectives arrived at? So the United Nations call upon the world leaders, and together they decide, they set some targets, development targets, to be met by a specific deadline. Development targets like poverty reduction, climate change, health, education, gender equality. So gender equality has always maintained its centrality in such world development targets. So next slide. In this presentation, we will we'll try to show that poverty reduction strategies can succeed only through multidimensional and long-term empowerment approaches. Multidimensional, these are important terms, multidimensional and long-term empowerment approaches that can challenge the existing imbalances of power between men and women, rather than using women as an instrument for poverty reduction. So I'll try to unpack all those terms as we proceed. But this is the main argument of this presentation. Next slide. And this is how we will proceed through the presentation. We'll first discuss the theoretical debates for establishing the linkage between gender equality and poverty, inequality and poverty reduction, why women are poor. Then we'll explain the role of social institutions causing gender inequality and the consequent challenges encountered by the poor. Third, strategies, development strategies required to overcome these challenges, and there will focus on the empowerment approach. What is the empowerment approach? And we'll discuss all these in the lights of two specific case studies: the Poverty Safety Net Program in Ethiopia and the Self-Employed Women's Association movement in India, to back up our argument. Next slide, please. So in the theoretical framework, let me very briefly touch upon the history of this women and poverty linkage. So this first dates back to anti-poverty approach of the 1970s. This is actually focused on meeting basic needs of households. That is, if a household, it was thought that if a household has its basic needs fulfilled, the food, clothing, and housing, then the condition of women will improve. So the development strategists, they sought solutions by improving only the economic status of women through involving them in income generating programs. This was in the 1970s. In the 1980s, it was replaced by the efficiency approach, which viewed women as productive resources. This approach emphasized harnessing the productive capacities of women to increase the efficiency and competitiveness of the development processes aimed at poverty alleviation. To give one example, in the Indian context, the best example of efficiency approach that comes to my mind is a slogan, Shakkhor Mayer Shantan Nirakhor Hoy Na, which means we need literate women to produce good citizens, literate citizens of tomorrow, to build the citizens of tomorrow, which are assumed they will be male citizens mostly. The strategists, the development thinkers never visualized educating women for the purposes of self-reliance or empowering them on their own right. So this is the efficiency approach, where we think of educating women or using them as a productive resource for achieving other developmental outcomes. Consequently, both these approaches failed because in very recent terms, even after the turn of the century, we find that 60% of chronically hungry people in the world are women and girls. This is as per UNDP reports. And the causes for this failure was tracked down to the inability to reassess the structural causes of both gender inequality and poverty, which are much more complex and multidimensional in nature than just meeting the basic needs of household. So here I will try to unpack other concepts like what is poverty, how is it caused, how is it viewed. So usually the my first proposition is that usually we define poverty only in economic terms, in terms of economic deprivation, in terms of income and expenditure. But as we'll see, this is highly inadequate because poverty is much more than that. It's a social experience. It's a day-to-day experience. So there are scholars like Robert Chambers who have defined poverty in a much more holistic manner. They have defined poverty as a cluster of deprivations that combines material, physical, social, and psychological aspects, where it encompasses dimensions of powerlessness, voicelessness, and a feeling of being excluded alongside material deprivations. So economic deprivations is a part of the poverty experience. And when we see poverty as a holistic experience, the causes of such poverty are also due to social, historical, and cultural processes that we'll explain in a while. So, and these processes lead to forced exclusion of certain particular socioeconomic categories of people from the development processes by restricting their access to the opportunities and resources generated by the society. This is what we call social exclusion, the phenomena of social exclusion, and that takes place on the basis of specific categories like gender, race, disability, caste in the Indian context, and is a consequence of unequal power relations and social relations of production and reproduction over a long period of time. It's a historical process. So countering this will also require a long-term approach. It cannot be done by quick fixes, like in 2-3 years of development projects or schemes. So that is a thing that we need to come in mind, keep in mind, that how we view poverty, whether we view poverty in mere economic terms, inadequate economic terms, or we view poverty in multidimensional ways, is very important about how we formulate strategies to address poverty. And since gender is a social category by which social exclusion takes place, women form part of that particular social category. And now we focus on how women are deprived of resources by the social institutions. So, next slide. Women as a social category are subjected to discriminatory processes that have both economic dimensions and cultural dimensions. What are the economic dimensions? In economic dimensions, they are denied access to skills because many will go to the causes because the parents are not willing to educate their daughters, so they are denied access to skills, and as a result they have less access to opportunities and means of livelihoods. um, a major economic dimension is that they are excluded from property rights and entitlements. That also has a cultural dimension to it. I'll come to it very soon. Um, there is a concept of social structuring of the division of labor, right? How? Because this social structuring make women responsible always for reproductive labor, unpaid care work, domestic chores, and mostly low-paid casual work or self-employment. Women are forced to go into this because of these economic dimensions, which is very related to the cultural dimensions also. And these cultural dimensions of gender inequality encompass elements of injustices originating from dominant values or perceptions of a society that devalue everything coded feminine. Uh, an example that comes to my mind is, how do we devalue everything coded feminine when we say এই ছেলেটা না খুব মেলি, ও খুব মেলি স্বভাব, ও মেয়েদের মতো কাঁদে, or when we say আমি কিন্তু হাতে চুড়ি পরে বসে নেই, which means that হাতে চুড়ি পরে বসে থাকা is something devalued. So anything coded feminine is devalued, and that leads to that is manifested through not only through undervaluation of women's works and needs, but even result in physical insecurity of women and resulting in sexual harassment in the workplace or domestic violence at one's own home. So therefore, these are the several ways in women experience intangible forms of poverty as marginalization, vulnerability, dependency, and powerlessness. And it's very different from the way it's experienced by men in that particular concept. But there seems to be very inadequate attention to these social realities of poor women. Next slide. Now, we will see that there's a level of institutional gender bias at the way these policies are formulated, because most of the development policy makers are concerned with conventional male-centered view of poverty, where they view poverty only merely as household income, and the poverty alleviation programs are conceived on the basis of unitary household model. That is, the development policy makers think of when they design a program, they think of poor households and how much money, how income needs to be transferred to particular poor households, where they seem to think of the family as an undifferentiated unit, where as if resources are all pooled together and then distributed rationally and equitably among the family members by a altruistic male head. But women know through their life experiences that that's not how household operates, right? So there's an insufficient understanding of the intra-household dynamics in reality that hinges on very unequal relationships and within the household, and that results in very unequal distribution of resources among the female members of the family. So the policymakers do not take this into this intra household unequal power relations into consideration then when they're actually policy making. Now there are also the social institutions. Next slide. So there are distributed social institutions that result in gender inequality. They're like formal and informal laws, cultural practices, traditional norms, codes of conduct. These are very important things when we speak of gender equality, like marriage practices, which result in marriage or inheritance norms, resulting in denial of material assets to the girls, ownership on inheritance. One of the worst forms of gender discrimination in the household level we all know is female feticide, result of selective abortion and systematic neglect and underinvestment in girls and women. Early marriage and dowry practice could make parents unwilling to invest further in the education of girl children, denying them access to enhanced capabilities. We discussed this earlier. Early marriage and childbirth among girls also result in increased risks for maternal mortality, deteriorated health and nutritional status for women. Low levels of educational attainment and failing health thus limit the potential employment opportunities for women, exposing them to lifelong and even intergenerational risks of poverty. The social norms related to gender divisions of labor also make women responsible for unpaid care work and domestic chores at the household level. So the works that the women do at home, like looking after the elders, bringing up children, cooking for everybody, these things, it's done at the community level outside the household. It can be done by men, and then it's not looked down after by society, and men are paid handsomely for it. Chef, chief chef of a hotel who cooks for his customers are they are handsomely paid. A tailor who can be a male, he is offering his services at the marketplace. He is paid for it. He's a professional. He's considered a professional. A woman at the household who stitches clothes for her children or the family members, who cooks for her family members, is taken for granted. It's entirely unpaid care work, right? So that's the difference. So these norms, and when at the community level, what we discussed, that everything coded feminine is devalued. This results in sexual harassment. So there are norms related to gender property, and these norms often restrict women from accessing or fully exploiting the opportunities of participating in the labor market available to them. In certain areas where strict norms of seclusion are enforced, women either work as unpaid labor of the household or are involved in home-based economic activity. Even where they gain access to labor markets, women receive lesser wage rates than men due to existing conventions and incorrect social perceptions about lower productive capacity of women. Moreover, they are also denied any control over their earnings with the household. In fact, income generation activities can impose a double burden on women, since the existing social institutions can in no way alleviate the reproductive labor of housework and childcare. However, since all such institutions are social constructs, next slide please. So since all such institutions, when we understand that all such institutions are social constructs, it has been artificially constructed by us, by the society, we also realize that there's immense possibility of bringing out transformative change by reforming and reshaping such discriminatory social institutions. That's exactly what has been done over the ages, across the ages, through such reforms. So, a probable route to achieve this end could be the women's empowerment approach that came into the development discourse in 1990s. What is this empowerment approach? This calls for sharing of power and responsibility by both women and men at home, workplace, or the wider community level. So this is the most important component of changing power relations, starting from our home, which is sharing of power, decision-making power, and responsibility of unpaid work, unpaid domestic chores by both men and women at home, workplace, or the wider community level. Next slide. How do we define empowerment? Empowerment in this context can be explained in terms of enhancement of bargaining power, on the parts of women for this purpose, that is determined by an interplay of several factors like ownership and control of assets, like arable land and poverty. When men own assets, especially or land, her bargaining power within the home is manifold. Access to social support systems, support of the state. So economic factors definitely, like as per employment, definitely strengthens one's ability to negotiate. So does enhancing women's consciousness, self-confidence, and abilities through access to education and health. This is where the multidimensional view of poverty comes in. In order to address women's poverty, we addressing economic deprivations through employment or asset ownership is not enough. We also need to enhance the policymakers also need to enhance women's conscious self-confidence abilities. But also, since the phenomena of social exclusion takes on the basis of depriving specific social groups or categories, the group solidarity factor is very important. It's the group solidarity and the collective challenge posed by an organized group. Here, for this purpose, is the organized group of women to discriminatory social institutions that can actually facilitate the process of change. So, poverty reduction strategies for women thus require multi-pronged, multi-dimensional approach and with a long-term approach. So let's try to understand this with the help of two very brief case studies from also taken from other parts of the world as well as from India. Next slide, please. These two case studies, one of these is called the Productive Safety Net Program, or the PSNP. It's operated by the government of Ethiopia, and the other is very known to us, Self-Employed Women's Association Movement. It's called Seva in India. Next slide. So the Productive Safety Net Program, the PSNP, was launched in Ethiopia in 2005 and is aimed at consumption smoothing of individuals who suffer from food insecurity through food and cash transfers. That is, the households that suffer from food insecurity, they are identified, and then food and their basic needs of consumption are addressed by involving them in public works programs. very similar to our Aksho Diner Kaj, the NREGS program that's happening in India for the last 15 years, 15 years. So therefore, the program has a strong focus on poor female-headed households and encourages women's participation in public works activities. Provisions of community creches are there as well as flexible time for women. It has been incorporated in the program design so that women can accommodate their domestic responsibilities along with public. This is very important. So women have been targeted for transfer of food and cash, but provisions have made in a way so that women can accommodate their domestic responsibilities along with the public, not relieved of domestic responsibilities. This is very important. Therefore, though the program has achieved its objectives to a reasonable extent, next slide please, designed kind of reinforce the existing form of gender divisions of labor. So it does not challenge the power relations at its core. Women are still made responsible for housework and childwork. The focus on quantitative measures of participation, that is, how many women are participating and getting benefits, restricts the scope for more meaningful ways of engaging with the issue of addressing poverty in women. For example, the program has been unable to address other social risks and vulnerabilities faced by women at household level due to societal norms like early marriages. That the program design does not take into account the household dynamics and the impact of social institutions in the specific context is evident from its treatment of the polygamous households. There are existence of polygamous households in society where this program is operating. So in the event of a man having two or more wives, only the first wife is as the beneficiary of the program. The other wives, irrespective of their contribution to PSNP, are treated as additional beneficiaries, thus making them dependent on the first wife and aggravating their social vulnerability. Nor has been there any compelling evidence of increase in women's decision-making capacity within the household and control over their own earnings. Thus, the sole intervention of transferring income to women has reinforced the existing gender relations rather than enhancing their bargaining power. Next, please. On the other hand, the Self-Employed Women's Association, Seva, is a national trade union registered in 1972 in India with a membership base of 1.5 million members for members. It's of 2018. So there are poor self-employed women workers from the informal economy across 16 states in India. These women are extremely poor, who usually work as hawkers, vendors, manual laborers, home-based producers, rural producers. Next slide, please. The principal objective of Seva is achieving self-reliance through enhancing economic and social security of poor women, and the organization attempts to achieve this multi-pronged approach that includes income generation, asset ownership, healthcare, child care and nutrition, education, housing, leadership training, and organizing women in groups in the forms of unions or cooperatives. State members also attend literacy classes and sessions on legal education, developing self-confidence, competence, and responsibility among its members are integral components of the leadership trainings built into the organizational strategy of Seva. Additionally, Seva day care centers have been an important initiative in relieving women of their child care responsibilities. Next slide. Studies have revealed that along with considerable increase in income and wages of Seva members, there have been marked improvements at the level of household decision making, increase in self-esteem, and Seva members have an increased say within the household, even about marriage practices or reproductive decisions. Also, evidence has reduced feelings of vulnerability, insecurity, enhanced levels of inner strength and control over their own lives. They have also reported gaining more voice and effectiveness in public interactions. Significantly, instead of focusing on individualized approach to women's empowerment, Seva has focused on social support systems for women. So this is what we call the approach of group solidarity. So therefore, this integrated and holistic Seva approach to address the needs of the worker as a laborer as well as a woman has resulted in new and innovative ways to fight poverty and vulnerability. Next slide. Therefore, what are the lessons we have drawn from these two contrasting experiences? These two contrasting experiences of PSNP in Ethiopia and Seva in India points towards three directions. Firstly, a multi-pronged anti-poverty strategy like Seva is more effective in addressing the multidimensional nature of poverty in women rather than focusing on only income or asset transfer as in PSP. Secondly, tackling gender inequality and poverty caused by socio-historical processes requires a long-term approach. Seva is almost approaching its 50th year. It was formed in 1972. Thirdly, the phenomena of social exclusion that takes place on the basis of disadvantaged social groups like gender, race, ethnicity, class, caste, etc., can be countered only through strategies of similar group mobilization. Now, next slide. The social protection strategies like PSNP in Ethiopia have been applied widely by mainstream development policymakers like the UNDP, DFID, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, everywhere, since the last decade to address poverty and vulnerability. These have mostly treated the issue of women's poverty as a secondary concern, and these strategies have interpreted gender inequality only in terms of practical gender needs that involve economic resources, services, and structure that support women in their existing roles of wives and mothers. For example, development agency that is working, say, water and sanitation, insists that women have to go far to fetch water. Okay, let's bring pipelines to their home, or let us make some water near to their home. But nobody is questioning that why is it always the woman who has to go fetch water? Why is this responsibility not shared by other members of the family? So these strategies do not challenge the discriminating social institutions for fear of upsetting existing power relations operating in society. They are called addressing only the practical gender needs. But addressing poverty that has been caused by gender inequality would require strategies like renegotiation of unfair divisions of domestic labor, reversal of valuation of the girl child, freedom of mobility for women, or protection from gender-based violence. These strategies that can potentially challenge power relations and add to the empowering life experience of women have been termed strategic gender needs, and these require long-term commitment through mobilization strategies resulting in both individual and collective empowerment. Ideally, therefore, poverty reduction strategies for women should combine practical gender needs as well as strategic gender needs. Therefore, we conclude, we unpack the argument that we put forward in this paper at the very beginning of this presentation, that we established that it's only through multidimensional and long-term empowerment approaches that we can potentially challenge distinctions of power between men and women, and that can be effective poverty reduction strategies. On the other hand, an instrumentalist approach that treats women as instruments to achieve other outcomes based on only economic efficiency would serve to reduce the existing inequalities and consequently would help to address poverty. So I have listed out the references that I have used for this presentation in the last slides of this presentation. If anybody wants to look at what are the resources that I have used, here are there for you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for such an insightful and vibrant presentation about the role of discriminating social institutions that are responsible for creating gender equality, and also telling us about the gender needs and how it can help us in changing the social and economic conditions. So, thank you once again. Uh, I would like to now move to the technical session of the presentation, and we can take the questions afterward. So, moving on to the technical session of the paper presentation, our first speaker is Suleiman Khan and Dr. A.K.M. Anwarujaman. Will be presenting their paper on fertility of Muslims in selected city blocks of West Bengal. It's a joint paper. I would request them to start. And one more announcement would be that since we are lacking our time span, please stick to the time limits. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon to everyone. Myself is Suleiman Khan, researcher, Department of Geography, Alia University, Kolkata. And I would like to present a paper in collaboration with Professor K.M. Jaman, Department of Geography, Alia University, Kolkata. And I also would like to present the paper with a PowerPoint presentation. Please allow me to share my screen over here. So title of the paper is entitled as Fertility Status of the Muslims in Selected City Blocks of West Bengal, a Gender Perspective. As we all know, that it is the only biological medium through which human society can replenish themselves on Earth. By maintaining the population resource ratio, most of the developing countries, India, Pakistan, etc., are following antenatal population policy. In this regard, gender equality is observed at a high level. The previous research studies explored a negative relationship in gender equality and fertility. In case of India, the high fertility of Muslims than other Europe is a contentious issue, and the atmosphere of doubt hinders the path of overall development. Therefore, the main purpose of this study is to find out the role of gender disparity in the high fertility of Muslims in West Bengal. Objectives. The main objectives of these studies is to assess the among Muslim women in terms of gender equality, explore the influence of low gender equality on the high fertility rate of Muslim women. Study area methodology is very important part of any study. For this purpose, 6 city blocks of West Bengal state for field study, and the name of the city block as follows: Barashato, English Bazar, Nagrahattu, Nalhati2, Kaliachutri, Uti2. The latitudinal longitudinal station we can see from the table 1, and the location Bengal can see in the figure. Following a multi-stage random sample, these 6 city blocks have been selected, and the basis of the selection of these city blocks are Muslim dominancy in terms of population share, and that is population 50% or above. And besides that, the availability as well as accessibility of various amenities and services like education is also considered for selecting the city blocks. At first stage, Muslim dominancy city blocks have been identified. Total 65 city blocks has been identified in this way. After that, date score of the selected amenities and service have been created. City blocks are organized in a descending order based on their respective Z score value. In the next step, 4 city blocks are selected from 1/3 of the Z score list, 2 from middle, 1/3, and 2 from the bottom 1/3 list. Result and discussion. The result and discussion section is divided into 6 subsections, such as the decision to marry and is at marriage, education and financial autonomy, bottom measures and consensual gender preference at birth, and practice of patriarchy, and at last domestic violence. So we first focusing on the decision and marriage. We first the result of the field survey shows that Muslim women have very low opportunity to accept their decision for marriage, and their average age of marriage also very low, which is just little below of 17 years. From the fig 2, we can see that around 63.72% cases, the married Muslim women have not the opportunity to express their views of the decision of their marriage, and they got married by the other members of the family. From fig 3, we can observe negative relationship between the aged marriage of the Muslim women in the study area and the fertility rate. Figure number 4 represents the age at marriage, consent for marriage, and fertility rate of the Muslim married women. Here observe that the city blocks Barash English Bazaar of various services of the accessibility of amenities and services is represent higher level of age at marriage, consent for marriage, and low level of PFR. On the other hand, city blocks Kaliachok 3 and Shuti 2, where the status of various amenities and services are in poor, represent low age at marriage, low consent for marriage with high TFR. After focus on education and status, and here we see that the overall literacy rate of the Muslim women in West Bengal is only 64.77. That is very low compared to the Muslim men, 72.52. And from Fig 5, we observe that the dropout rate of the very high, especially in the higher level of education. We observe that from the Fig 5, the females, the proportion of the females is very low in higher category, graduate and in Figure 6, we see that fertility rate is very high, where overall education attainment married Muslim men and women is very low, such as in Kaliachok 3 and Shuti 2. So Barashat 2 and English 1, we observe a high level of education attainment of married Muslim men and women with low level of TFL. So now we are focus on financial status. The financial autonomy status is important in gender issue, and for analyzing the financial autonomy status, we considered various things such as participation rate, of women in daily ruling activity, low percentage of women having own bank account, and we are also considered here the Muslim women participate in outdoor works, that is minimum 3 km distance away from the source. The Fig 7 represents the case of Barashat to English Bazaar, where the fertility rate is in low, represents comparably higher financial autonomy status for the Muslim men, and in the city block Suti to AHO, where the fertility rate is comparably high, represent comparably lower level of financial autonomy status for Muslim women. After financial autonomy, now we are going to focus on control measures and non-consensual sex, and we observe that for contraceptive tactics, there is responsibility bear by the Muslim men. Married Muslim men are not willing to bear the responsibility of practicing modern contraceptives, and around 75.6% cases, Muslim women mainly bear the responsibility. And from the Figure 9, we observe that the prevalence of non-consensual sex among Muslims are quite high. Around 29.95% cases, Muslim women reported that they have experienced non-consensual sex in their married life. And we observed that in case of Barshat to English Bazar, where fertility rate is low, represent comparatively lower level of the presence of non-consensual sex. And in case of Kalichok 3 and Shuti 2, the presence of the non-consensual sex and the fertility is both are very high. And third, now we are going to focus on gender preference at birth and practice of patriarchy. It is observed that among Muslims, the preference of son child is very also very high, and preference is represents through the figure number 11, where we observe that the proportion of Muslim families considering the superiority of male child, and considering the birth at least one male child, and considering the girl child as undesirable, is quite high in the city blocks Kaliachok 3 and Shuti 2, and it is low in many cases in Barsha and English Bazar, where the fertility rate is low. From thick 10, we also shows that around 72.92% cases, Muslim families are desired for male child, and their this desire of male child in many cases increase their number of children, that is more than desire. Now we are going to focus on domestic violence, which is also a good indicator of domestic violence, and it is reported by the around 33.17% cases that the respondents experienced assault and torture by the members of the family male members. And from the figure 12, we observed that in case of Barsha to English Bazar, where the prevalence of is comparatively low, represent low level of fertility, and in case of city blocks like Kaliachok 3, Shuti 2, Mograhat 2, had the prevalence of domestic violence is quite high, represent comparatively better, comparatively higher level of fertility for Muslims. So in calculation, after the above analysis, conclude that there is a gender equality is also strongly related with the fertility rate and status of the Muslims, and the overall gender equality status of the Muslims in the state and in the in the study area is not good. And in order to achieve high gender parity with high social development, it's required even more into invest in the field of various social sectors such as health and education, which will reduce the fertility. And this has been also proved beyond doubt that investment in the social sectors will be much more effective to reduce the fertility rate than adopting any coercive method. And Kerala is a classic example for that. Even our eastern neighbors has been largely successful in this front. Thank you for your patience, and that's all.
Thank you for the enriching paper. We have two more papers in this session. We will first listen to those, and then we will come to the question answer session. Our next paper is on women constraints of reproductive lives across households, strategies and contradictions within Indian context. And the paper, it's a field view interpretation in the framework of South Asian feminist perspective by Shudha Bharti, PhD research scholar, Center for Women Studies, University of Hyderabad. Over to you.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Malda College and the Department of English for giving consideration and giving me this opportunity to present my academic paper. So, as my paper name was titled, like it already said. Again, I will repeat. The title of my study is "Women Constraints of Reproductive Lives Across Households: Strategies and Contradictions Within." I'm telling this paper in Indian context, a field in the framework of South Asian feminist perspective. So this study is about this present study sees to the South Asian feminist perspective, describing of gender relations at the household level, different contexts and operation of women in a patriarchal setup of family, women perceptions of own welfare and strategies to cope up with a difficult situation with the limited choices to live up to of what they wanted in the context of pregnancy matters. So here, I have took the approach of South Asian feminist perspective, how have conceptualized the household. Like the feminists, like basically they took a critique stand of the mainstream construction of household, where they viewed household as a equitable unit, or as a as a unit of production, consumption, distribution. So if we see from the feminist point of view, so they put their stand against it. The feminists largely critique the family as an oppressive institution in Indian society context, in how they have conceptualized. So they have seen, like in general, the women have several challenges in the form of societal pressures. The society basically based on oppressive patriarchal relations, and the families functions under the rule of male dominations. The specific subordination of women is rooted in the household and the personal relationships within the household too. So I quote here Maitri Raj Krishna Raj from her work, Maitri Krishna Raj from her work, Gender and the Household Domain, Social and Cultural Dimension. Here she described the household structure that which gives preference to women in power, authority, property rights, and as bearers of lineage, gives also preferential access to development benefits. So here I have picked some feminist concepts for the paper presentation, because due to time constraint, I will elaborate on this. The feminist concepts of strategies, bargaining power, and self-worth are significant to locate women's social status in the household structure of power and subordination. For instance, the concept of strategy, the discussion on the feminist strategy to understand the gender relations within the household as an oppressive institution. Like I quote here Rajni Palriwala from her work, Structures and Strategies, Women, Work and Family. Like this study is done in 1990. She argued that the attempts by women to salvage and to maintain family norms and kinship networks, which are recognized as oppressive despite this character, kinship organization and family forms had certain givenness. Women had to work out the strategies for survival and power within them. On the other hand, women also valued the family as it provided them with moral and material support and protection in an oppressive and exploitative society. It provided them a sphere of some limited autonomy, often in an increasingly strange and expanding world. Especially here, they are like referring to the globalization, privatization, and the state power, like the withdrawal of state power for gender development. Therefore, women may not act as passive victims, but of women choosing, planning, strategizing, acting, manipulating, living. Also, even where women are clearly oppressed, there are spheres where they may act and decide. So all this I will correlate with my field view in the context of unwanted pregnancy. Again, the concept of self-worth is important. Like the allocation of authority and control within household structures by social norms and values produce unequal gender relations where men command authority over resources. The women are less likely to secure favorable outcomes for themselves in household decision-making process. So again, here I quote Mandakini Pant from her study, Intra-Household Allocation Patterns, a study in female autonomy. This study was done in 2000. So she observed that social norms, values, and practices play a crucial role in diffusing gender conflict. Women find it strategic to avoid potential conflict situations because they know that the cost of confrontations are likely to be high. They feel that their long-term security lies in subordinating their well-being to that of male authority figures. This conscious strategy reflects the actual evaluation of this self-worth. Again, that Bina Agrawal, like she has termed the concept of overt behavior and covert behavior. Like generally, like for the woman resentment or for the resistance, we should not only look for overt acts, but there are many covert acts in which they express their their dissatisfaction, their dissentment. So here I will shift to my field view of women constraints of reproductive life and how the strategies contradictions like I observed in my study. So here the feminist critique of theoretical understanding of dominant postulates of household perspective is significant to locate the key woman narrative in the reproductive role and decision-making process at the household level. That is, in the study context, it is pregnancy matters, particularly looking for abortions for unwanted pregnancy. The South Asian feminist perspective of understanding gender dimensions of women resilience or strategies are vividly witnessed in the collective women narratives from the field in the context of women, again, like experience of unwanted pregnancy and their choices of abortion. So the method used for women narratives. So the data is collected from a single village of rural Telangana in Sangareddy district during the research period 2015 to 2019. The feminist method of narratives, abortion recall storytelling method was used with women to share their experiences of unwanted pregnancy and abortion. Basically, the women were reached out first who were voluntarily ready to tell their stories and had shared their inner feelings and personal experiences related to abortion. Also, what were the women's own personal feelings and thought gone through during this event time and their standpoints, women facing such situations of unwanted pregnancy and abortion. Various personal factors were narrated, such as abortion due to unwanted pregnancy was as a bodily relief or else was a painful process. Women had the individual or the family struggle to deal with the situation during their abortion journey and afterwards, and some other challenges were met and questioning the healthcare received by women. So it was very significant to know about how women themselves had problematized the situations of experiencing pregnancies and their context to terminate the unwanted pregnancies for various reasons or otherwise. So the study finding, major study finding, the stories of women belonging to different caste community narrate their challenges and struggles faced by them in relation to their pregnancy, either wanted or unwanted. The women across caste, religion, and region were found to be more bound to be tied with their family roles as wife or a mother. Majority of the women got married before the age of 20 years and had 2 children by the age of 22 or 23 years. These women were too young when they experienced unwanted pregnancy or underwent abortion due to this. There were women who got married very early in their teenage years too, and other unmarried teenage girls had experienced unwanted pregnancy and had abortion. The caste location of these young women had made a difference in their experience of unwanted pregnancy in terms of their struggle to deal with the situation and seeking emotional and financial support from her husband or from their families or from the community or household. Women women from other regions, like there were other women like from the other states belonging to other states were living with their husbands to face the challenges in dealing with the situation on unwanted pregnancy and going for abortion. Specifically, women from other states did not bring out any discussion on seeking out help from other neighborhood women of their community for any kind of support, or rather seem more engaged independently or had a dialogue with their husbands itself. Also, these married women had interactions with their husband or to their family members on having abortion. Their expression of distress towards conceiving pregnancy was observed only after having the first child. Married women had rarely come for the demand for the abortion for the first child after marriage. The field data revealed in different ways that have challenged any simple notion that women in rural contexts have accepted the legitimacy of intra-household inequality or self-perceived low perception on pregnancy decision. The overt appearance of compliance, I listen to my husband, did not mean that women lack a correct perception of their best interest, reflect a survival strategy stemming from the constraints on their ability to act overtly in pursuit of those interests. So I want to conclude the study like the study in the study context, the household location of the local women was important to question how we interpreted and understood their context of unwanted pregnancies and abortion matters. The mainstream feminist framework of women agencies and choices for liberation and to have control over their bodies and right to abortion cannot be interpreted In the same women emancipation spirit in this study context, the main finding of the study which contradicts from this perspective and observed actually women in this part of rural area were not facing much confrontation for the termination of unwanted pregnancy. There was a huge presence of abortion due to unwanted pregnancy and common for women to go for abortion either with the support of husband, family or without the support of anyone. Perhaps this finding of more women had access to abortion could be seen as women's strengthened position and social mobility towards an equitable gender-based society. But what was contradicting to this was the deep-rooted internalization of women's perception of ideal womanhood to get married at a right age once they cross the age of 18 years, like they self-perceive like once they cross the age of 18 years and they are not getting married, so some issues is there, like so they are worried about their own well-being and as like they are the source of uh, worry for the family. Bearing children and particularly giving birth to a son was considered towards the fulfillment of a complete, fully satisfied woman's self-body. Being able to give birth to a son is like to an extending of the immense support to her own husband and in-laws family and to secure herself a future by producing offspring in the form of son in bearing of family care. In reverse, women indulge in self-blame in case of if only girls were born and see the faults within in her body. Also, women internalize the self-practicing of bearers of family sterilization as the only device of fertility control. In reality, they are the subject of patriarchal mindset of state policies of reproductive and sexual health programs for targeting only women, basically rooted in the power dynamics at household level, extending privilege status to men and subordination of women towards internalization of gender roles to fit within the patriarchal social settings of the family and the self-worth approach of bearers of child producers. Yeah, that's the presentation of my paper today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam, for your fine presentation about the conditions of the women in the household and especially with their reproductive freedom and issues related with it. We will move on to our next paper, that is Resilience in the Journey of the Third Gender, a study of Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi's autobiographies. And it is by Kanika Gupta, PhD research scholar of DCRUST, Haryana. Over to you, ma'am.
Hello, good afternoon to one and all present here. My name is Kanika Gupta, and I am a research scholar from Digrust University, Haryana. First of all, I would like to thank to all the organizers of this wonderful webinar for giving me the opportunity to present my paper. And the title of my paper is Resiliences in the Journey of the Third Gender, a study of Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi's autobiographies. Now to present my paper, I would like to share my screen. So kindly allow me to do that. So is my screen visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, so as I have told you, the title of my paper is Resiliences in the Journey of the Third Gender, a study of Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi's autobiographies. Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi is an emerging transgender writer who voices her sufferings, traumas, and torments of being a transgender herself and brings to limelight the marginalized community truths and mental agony through her autobiographies, Me Hijra, Me Lakshmi, and Red Lipstick, The Men in My Life. So I have studied these two autobiographies in my paper, Me Hijra, Me Lakshmi, and Red Lipstick, The Men in My Life. In the statement of Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi, she has quoted, that hijras are a sexual minority that is visible, and yet we are treated as the invisibles. I believe I was never invisible. I thought I am the face in the crowd and not the crowd. This statement itself shows the resilient character of Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi. Her attitude towards life shows her the biggest resilience, that how she is resiliating towards the society who is trying to bring her down. Next slide shows the status of transgenders, that how we perceive these transgenders in our daily society. In the minds of most Indians, a hijra is an annoyance. A man with long hair, typically dressed in a sari, who seems to always and miraculously know when a child is being born or a wedding taking place. A hijra arrives just in a time to beg, and if you don't acquiesce, you will be cursed. The same hijra waits at the traffic lights and peers into the windows of stopped cars once again to ask for money. Hijras, who can be trans, intersex, or eunuchs, were historically revered in ancient India, but over these past 2 centuries have become one of the country's most misunderstood and marginalized communities. In India, the status of transgenders is diverse. The term hijra derives from the Urdu word hijr. The word hiji refers to the soul, a holy soul. This means that the body in which the holy soul resides is called the hijra. They are invited among the gatherings to offer blessings, and in the meanwhile, they are also tempered in the society. They are looked differently in different parts of the country, and they are considered both as religious icons. In Indian culture, especially in the Hindu tradition, hijras are considered updevtas or sub god. They rank higher than the mortals, men and women, saints and sadhus as well. And an outcast, as stated in the words of Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi, that we are the biggest social outcast and we are treated as updevtas as well. So this is the biggest irony in their lives. She has also quoted her statement like this: आशीर्वाद समझ में आता है, इंसान क्यों नहीं? Which states the hypocrisy of our society, that at one level we are treating them as updevtas, and at the same level, at the another level, we are treating them as outcasts. Now, the next slide states the chronicles, that is the past history of the transgenders, that is how they are perceived in the past. So Indian nation has a long history of transgender community attached to it. The condition of prevalence of transgenders in India is also traced in Lakshmi's text. So in both the autobiographies of Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi, she has also traced the history of transgenders, that is from how they are evoluted. With a recorded history of over 4,000 years and being mentioned in ancient texts, the Hijra community is a testament to the sexual diversity that is integral yet often forgotten in Indian culture. The Hijra community has been mentioned in ancient literature, from most known of which is the Kama Sutra, a Hindu text on human sexual behavior. Hijra characters hold significant roles in some of the most important texts of Hinduism, including the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. One of the many forms of Shiva, a principal Hindu deity, involves him merging with his wife Parvati to become the androgynous Ardhanari, who holds special significance to many in the Hijra community. Hijras held important positions in the court and various facets of administration during the Mughal era India from the 16th to 19th century. They were also considered to hold religious authority and were sought for blessings, particularly during religious ceremonies. However, when the Indian subcontinent came under colonial rule during the 19th century, British authorities sought to eradicate and criminalize the Hijra community through various laws. These laws were later repealed after India attained independence. While the Hijra community is still revered by society at large and celebrated in religious, spiritual settings, they are often the victims of abuse and discrimination. So this slide also states the hypocrisy of the society. Next term, which I have mentioned in my paper, is gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria can also be called as gender incongruence. This condition arises when a person's anatomy mismatches his own gender identity. The person affected with this dysphoria never faces any physical symptoms, but they have some behavioral changes which affect their mind inwardly. This Disorder can even be identified before pre-adolescence when a child feels that they belong to the opposite sex. They undergo a clash between their body and mind, which results in depression and isolation. They will be gazing to wear the clothes meant for the opposite sex. As an adult, such people will have a desire to show them as they belong to the opposite sex and literally hates one's anatomy and wishes to get rid of one's own body parts. So we can see how they suffer internally. They try to hide their biological identity. And when such feelings are suppressed, then depression and isolation tends to arise in these transgenders. So depression is a common problem among the people who suffer from gender dysphoria. Lakshmi in her books has described her childhood.
मैंने आवाज पे काम मेरा हो गया है कोई क्वेश्चन पूछेगा तो बताना पड़ेगा
Please mute your mic. So continuing the presentation, Lakshmi in her books has described her childhood, especially the moment when she started recognizing herself with feminine attitude or dominance in her male body. It took about 6 to 7 years for her to find her way into the Hijra community. As a child, she faced a lot of mental trauma and cannot understand who she is. So Lakshmi in her autobiographies has also stated the instances where she faced gender dysphoria. She was born a boy, but she never felt like a boy. She explained her status of sexuality as I am the first born male child, his eldest son, oozing femininity. This explains how Lakshmi feels inward and how she longs for femininity with a male biology. She is attracted to boys. She acted in a different manner. She did not play with the boys of his age and never roam in street like typical boys and play with mud. Even during her childhood, Lakshmi in her book, in her autobiography, Me Hijra, Me Lakshmi, points out that I started to live an internal life, the life of a loner. So we can say that isolation is the first phase of being a Hijra, and it torments them so much. And that started for Lakshmi during her childhood itself. She was teased for dancing like a woman. All made fun of her by saying that she possessed the body of a boy, but her body language was that of a woman. So I have quoted the reference of Judith Butler's books, Gender Trouble, Feminism and the Subversion of Identity in my paper, where she states that when a child is born based on the chromosomes and external genitalia, sex is determined. Gender is a socio-constructed phenomenon, according to Butler's view in her work, Gender Trouble, Feminism and Subversion of Identity. Gender is culturally constructed. Hence, gender is neither the casual result of sex nor as seemingly fixed X sex. The presumption of a binary gender system implicitly retains the belief in a mimetic relation of gender to sex, whereby gender mirrors sex or is otherwise restricted by it. Butler in her book Gender Trouble also explains that how gender is performative in nature. She explains that gender is a performance, but gender is not a performance, but that gender is made by doing. Butler's idea is that gender comes to exist because it is done in a certain way. And this doing gender in a certain way makes it so in our society. For example, when a woman wears a dress, the dress is made feminine. These things are made symbols of that category, not because of some appointed meaning given to them, but through a body which passes on its larger categorical meaning to the things that it does. So when a man wears a skirt, he does not automatically make it feminine, as the skirt is still associated with the female body. But he also isn't denied the power to make the skirt masculine or to expand the boundary of what is allowed under the table, what is allowed under the label masculinity. His body, just like the female body, has the power to inscribe and can change what the object means. But here the trouble comes. As the object itself carries a label, and the object can also affect what his body means. And herein lies the trouble. The trouble is the point that in order to give space to the third gender identity, we must break the manifestations and understandings of centuries of social category of masculine and feminine on which our basic system of identity is formed. Therefore, when third gender is portrayed on a cellulite, it often relies on the symbols appointed to a particular social category to highlight the otherness of other gender. For example, the use of loud behavior, cross-dressing, and gaudy makeup. The paradox is that in order to break the rigid structures of gender binaries, one must the very same rigid structure to develop an understanding and identity for the third gender. Now, the next slide states the resilience as we have portrayed through the books of Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi. What is resilience? Resilience is the capability of a strained body to reach size and shape after deformation caused especially by competitive stress. So we can say that it is the capacity to recover from difficult life situations. It is the capacity to bounce back, to retaliate for one's own strengths in society. Lakshmi's two autobiographies created a great impact in the minds of human beings about the treatment of a third gender. Her autobiography, Me Hijra, Me Lakshmi, is considered as one of the honest and open biography ever. Her work deals with the myths, culture, tradition, stereotypes, and identity of a Hijra who undergoes in one's lifetime. This book teaches one to respect human beings and makes to accept one as how they are. It eradicated the prejudice of the Hijra community, placed the biased view over them. Her second autobiography, Red Lipstick, The Man in My Life, is a unique story. Here she portrayed the different men in her life and what is the importance of those men in her life. In this book, she unpeels layer after layer of her personal life, which is not so easy, and her journey towards Hijrahood. She makes the reader aware of the LGBT community, particularly of the Hijra community. She also describes about her friends, family, love life, and a struggle to do things for the society, especially for the marginalized Hijra community. In the words of Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi, she has quoted in her autobiography, Red Lipstick, that I created my Bharat to change. This Draupadi didn't wait for Arjun or Bhim to come. She could wash her hair in Dushyan's blood and tie them up. She took matters in her own hands. And this statement clearly defined the resilient element in her character. Now the conclusions, which I have found out from my paper, the basic things, that the characteristics of both men and women are lying within the physical and mental framework of these transgenders. It appears quite complex on the surface though, but it is the uniqueness of this community. This unique rarity should not be abused, should not be, we can say should not be mimicked or should not be made fun of. But this unique identity be made active. They can be employed in the place of a women and can certainly replace them. They are of them. Transgenders have battles to fight, which initially for them is a state of disparity. To overcome parity, they need a little support from our side. With the help of a little love and a little understanding for their personality, they will rise like a phoenix, breaking the shackles of society in their life. In the case of Lakshmi Narayan, she has got that little love and understanding from family itself. I supported her. So if we give them a little love and understanding, will show as like a phoenix breaking the shackles of the society lives, as we can see in the case of Lakshmi, who has put into light all the myths and stereotypes and changed the outlook of the Hijra community as a whole in her two autobiographies. So the mentality about these people is reshaped. Seeing only the mentality of the society. So the reality is the real here. And once it's reshaped, then the entire thing can be changed. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for your brilliant presentation. We have come to the last part of our second session. We are now open to questions. I'd like to ask Mani madam if she has anything to share with us regarding this paper, and we can ask questions from the audience.
Thank you. No, I was listening intently to all the presentations in this session, and all have been extremely enlightening. Especially, I was aware that I didn't cover the transgender portion in my presentation, and that was one drawback in inadequacy in my presentation. Enchanted by the last one. No, I don't have specific questions. I'm willing to answer if any other person has any questions.
Okay, so if we have, if there is anyone who wants to ask questions to our paper presenters, we are now open to the question from the audience. You can ask directly or you can put in the chat box as well. Anyone with the questions? Okay, I think we are not taking any question anymore. We have come to the end of our technical session. I would like to ask Aubrey to sum to this webinar and finally conclude the session. We will again join tomorrow at 11 a.m. with three resource persons and a few moderators. Over to you.
Thank you, Aratrika. Am I being audible enough?
Yes.
So, all must things must come to an end, but this end seems to be a kind of new beginning. International Women's Day is indeed an opportunity for us to revisit and recount the legacies left behind by women in history across cultures. This is also an invitation for larger humanity to learn a lesson in the same. And I extend my best wishes to all of you on this occasion. I would like to thank our esteemed resource persons, Dr. Ketaki and Srimati Dasgupta, for being kind enough to join us on the webinar today. Dr. Datta's presentation was as vivacious as ever, and though Mrs. Dasgupta feels that she is more comfortable with files than presentation, as she has mostly been an administrator, she has provided ample evidence to the contrary. I would like to thank our participants for their hearty participations and wonderful presentations. I would also like to thank my fellow compeers, Srimati Brototi Mishra, Dr. Anuradha Kunda, Aratrika Rai, Kaushik Shami, Nipanita Rai, Shampa Chakraborty, Jyotirmoy Shil, and Rumpa Poddar for untiring efforts to run the webinar smoothly. I would like to thank Dr. Manush Kumar Boiddo, Principal of Malda College, and Chief Patron of the webinar, as well as Prabhas Chaudhuri, Coordinator of IQAC Malda College, for their constant encouragement. And last but not the least, I would like to express my indebtedness to Biprotip Mondol Somnath Dotto for their technical support, without which it would not have been possible to run the program with ease. Finally, let me remind you all once again that we will start tomorrow sharp at 11 a.m. Thank you once again.
Thank you all for joining us. We end the session today.